What if I told you that before the great flood, beings from heaven descended to earth and corrupted all of creation? That these fallen angels didn't just rebel against God, but actively taught humanity forbidden knowledge that was never meant for us? The story you're about to hear isn't just ancient mythology. It's the missing piece that explains why our world became so broken that God had to destroy it with water. Today, we're diving deep into the complete timeline of the fallen angels, from their original rebellion to the giants they created, the secrets they revealed, and the cosmic judgment that followed. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this story was considered so dangerous that many tried to erase it from history entirely. Before we dive in, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like button and subscribing if you haven't already. Your support means we can continue providing these types of videos to help you learn something new or unwind. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. Over 30,000 people have joined this community where you can meet and connect with like-minded folks from around the world in the comment section down below. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? The Watchers descend above the clouds where mortal eyes have never gazed. There once stood beings of pure light. These were the Watchers. Their forms shimmered with divine radiance, their wings spanning distances that would dwarf mountains. For eons beyond counting, they served as guardians of creation, observing the dance of stars and the slow turning of worlds. Mount Hermon rises like a sleeping giant from the ancient landscape. Its peaks pierce the heavens, snow-capped and eternal. Here, where earth meets sky, the impossible happened. The divine touched the mortal realm in ways that would forever change both. The descent began not with thunder or earthquake, but with silence, a profound quiet that seemed to swallow sound itself. Then came the light, not the gentle glow of dawn, but something fierce and otherworldly. Streaks of brilliance carved through the atmosphere, each one a fallen guardian plummeting toward earth. 200 angels chose this path. 200 beings who once stood in the presence of the Almighty now fell like stars torn from their celestial homes. Their wings, once instruments of perfect flight, became anchors dragging them earthward. The very air around them sparked and burned as divine essence met mortal atmosphere. Mount Hermon trembled, not from the impact alone, but from the weight of what this moment meant. The carefully maintained boundary between heaven and earth had been crossed. More than simple disobedience, this represented a fundamental shift in the order of creation. The Watchers had become participants. Each falling angel carried within them knowledge that belonged only in the highest heavens. Secrets of creation, the hidden workings of reality, the true names of power, all of this divine wisdom now descended toward a world unprepared for such revelations. The earth itself seemed to sense the approaching storm. As they touched down upon Hermon's slopes, the angels' forms began to change. The pure light of their celestial bodies dimmed, taking on substance and weight. They felt gravity's pull for the first time, experienced the strange sensation of breath filling newly formed lungs. Mortality began to seep into their eternal essence like water soaking into cloth. The mountain became their gathering place, their new home between worlds. Here they would make choices that would echo through millennia. Here they would forge bonds that heaven never intended. The Watchers had descended, but they had not yet fallen completely. That darker transformation still lay ahead. In the valleys below, early humanity went about their simple lives, unaware that everything was about to change. They could not know that the glowing lights they glimpsed on the mountain peak would soon bring them gifts beyond imagination and consequences beyond measure. The stage was set for the greatest rebellion in all of creation's history. Before the fall, the heavens and the hierarchy. In the beginning, before time had weight or space had boundaries, there existed perfect order. Heaven stretched beyond mortal comprehension, filled with beings of light and purpose. Each angel had their place, their role, their sacred duty in the grand design of creation. At the highest throne sat the source of all light. Around this divine presence moved the seraphim, beings of pure worship whose very existence was song and praise. Their 6 wings covered them in humility, their voices creating harmonies that formed the foundation of reality itself. Beyond them stood the cherubim, guardians of divine mystery, their forms both beautiful and terrible to behold. The archangels carried divine will across the cosmos. Michael, the warrior, bore a sword that could cleave dimensions. Gabriel brought messages that could reshape worlds. Raphael carried healing that could mend the very fabric of existence. Each served with perfect devotion, their power matched only by their obedience. Below these mighty beings dwelt countless hosts of angels, each with their own gifts and purposes. Some tended the stars, others guided the winds, still others watched over the delicate balance of growing things. All served in harmony, their individual wills perfectly aligned with divine intention. Among these celestial hosts were the Watchers. Their role required them to observe without interfering, to witness without participating. They gazed upon creation from their heavenly posts, recording the slow dance of planets and the gradual unfolding of life. Theirs was a duty of perfect patience, eternal vigilance without action. These watchers possessed knowledge that other angels were not granted. They understood the secret workings of creation, the hidden patterns that governed reality. They knew how matter responded to spirit, how thought could become substance, how divine power could reshape the physical world. This knowledge was both their gift and their burden. The hierarchy was more than mere organization. It represented the perfect flow of divine will through creation. Each level received instruction from above and passed understanding below. The chain remained unbroken, the order maintained, the balance preserved. Heaven functioned like a vast instrument, each being playing their part in an eternal symphony. Yet within this perfect order, something stirred. The Watchers, blessed with observation and cursed with understanding, began to see creation differently. Their constant vigil over the lower worlds awakened something that had never before existed in heaven: curiosity about what lay beyond their assigned roles. They watched as humans took their first steps, spoke their first words, formed their first bonds of love and community. The angels observed these creatures of earth and clay, discovering the gift of choice, the power to shape their own destinies within the boundaries set by divine law. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Watchers began to wonder what it might feel like to choose rather than simply obey. The hierarchy that had once felt like home began to feel like a cage. The roles that had once brought purpose began to seem like limitations. The perfect order that had sustained heaven for eons began to show the first hairline cracks that would eventually split creation itself. Heaven remained unchanged, but within the hearts of certain angels, the seeds of rebellion had been planted. The fall had not yet begun, but its shadow was already growing long across the celestial realm. The world before the flood, humanity's golden age. Before the waters rose, before the judgment fell, the earth knew a time of wonder. The world stretched green and fertile, unmarked by desert or wasteland. Rivers flowed with crystal clarity, their paths gentle and predictable. The climate held a perfection that needed no seasons. Eternal spring blessed every corner of creation. Humanity walked in innocence during these early days. Their lives unfolded without the constant struggle that would later define mortal existence. Food grew abundantly with little effort. Animals approached without fear, their natural instincts still aligned with the peaceful intentions of their creation. Death was distant, aging gradual, suffering rare. The first generations lived for centuries, their bodies strong and their minds sharp beyond what later ages could imagine. They remembered their origins with clarity, passed down stories of divine creation through countless generations without the distortion that time usually brings. Their connection to the sacred remained immediate and personal. These early humans possessed abilities that would seem miraculous to modern eyes. Their understanding of natural law ran deeper than mere observation. They could sense the hidden patterns that governed growth and healing, communicate with animals in ways that transcended spoken language, and live in harmony with forces that later generations would fear or worship from afar. Family bonds stretched across centuries. Great-grandparents knew their descendants 20 generations removed. Wisdom accumulated across lifespans that measured nearly a millennium. Each person served as a living library, carrying within their memory the entire history of their people from the very beginning. Yet for all their gifts, these early humans remained innocent of certain kinds of knowledge. They knew nothing of warfare or violence, having no need to harm one another for resources or territory. The earth provided everything they required, and their numbers remained manageable, spread across vast territories with room for all. They had never seen the making of metal weapons or tasted the bitter herbs that could poison. The arts of manipulation and deception remained unknown to them. Their emotions flowed pure and direct: anger without hatred, sadness without despair, joy without the fear of its ending. At night, they gathered to share stories and songs, their voices rising in harmonies that seemed to make the stars shine brighter. They lived in communities, but without the complex hierarchies that would later divide their descendants. Leadership emerged naturally from wisdom and experience, not from force or cunning. Their relationship with the divine remained simple and direct. They spoke with heaven as children speak with loving parents, without fear, without ritual, without the elaborate ceremonies that later generations would develop to bridge the growing distance between earth and sky. Prayer flowed like breathing, natural and constant. The earth itself responded to their presence with generosity. Plants grew larger and sweeter where human hands tended them. Springs flowed clearer where human feet walked their banks. The very ground seemed to recognize and welcome these children of creation. But innocence, however beautiful, remains fragile. The world that humanity had known since their beginning was about to encounter forces beyond their understanding. Above them, the watchers gazed down with growing fascination, preparing to introduce knowledge that would transform paradise into something far more complex and far more dangerous. The Golden Age stood at its peak, unaware that its end was descending from the heavens on wings of light and shadow. The Pact on Mount Hermon. The summit of Mount Hermon had become a gathering place unlike any in creation's history. 200 angels stood in a circle beneath stars that had watched the birth of worlds. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath, sensing the weight of the decision being made upon its slopes. Semjaza stood at the circle's center, his form still radiant with celestial light, but somehow dimmed by the gravity of the moment. As their chosen leader, he bore the responsibility for what was about to unfold. The other angels looked to him with mixtures of anticipation, fear, and fierce determination. "We have watched for ages beyond counting," Semjaza's voice carried across the silent peak. "We have observed while remaining apart. We have witnessed beauty and wonder while forbidden to participate." His words fell like stones into still water, each one creating ripples that spread through the assembled host. The pact they contemplated was more than rebellion. It represented a fundamental choice to abandon their nature as eternal beings for something unknown and dangerous. They would trade immortality for experience, divine detachment for mortal engagement. The price was exile from heaven. The reward was freedom to choose their own path. Each angel spoke their true name as they joined the covenant. Ancient syllables of power echoed across Hermon's peaks, binding them together in shared purpose and shared doom. These names would later be recorded by human scribes as a roster of the fallen. But in this moment, they represented hope. Hope for something beyond the roles that had defined them since creation's dawn. The oath they swore was terrible in its simplicity. They would descend to walk among humanity. They would share their divine knowledge with mortal minds. They would take wives from among the daughters of men and create offspring that would bridge the gap between heaven and earth. Together they would face whatever consequences their choices might bring. But beneath these spoken vows lay deeper motivations that each angel carried in silence. Some were driven by loneliness. Eons of watching without companionship had worn at their hearts like water wearing stone. Others felt curiosity burning within them, like a flame that could no longer be contained. Still others were moved by what they called love, though none could say if what they felt for humanity was truly that sacred emotion. Azazel spoke of the gifts he would bring, the secrets of metalworking and weaponry that would advance human civilization by millennia. Penemu promised to teach writing, the art of capturing thought in symbols that could outlast memory. Kazdai would reveal the hidden movements of the stars and planets, unlocking celestial mysteries. As each angel declared their intended contribution, the magnitude of their choice became clear. They were not simply abandoning heaven. They were preparing to transform Earth into something it was never meant to become. The knowledge they carried would accelerate human development at a pace that might shatter the careful balance of creation. The pact was sealed not with signatures or rituals, but with a shared act of will that resonated through both heaven and earth. The moment their agreement became complete, something shifted in the cosmic order. The carefully maintained separation between divine and mortal began to blur. Above them, the stars seemed to flicker with uncertainty. Below them, the earth trembled with anticipation. The Watchers had become something new, neither fully angelic nor yet mortal, but something in between. They had chosen transformation over stability, experience over security, love over duty. The covenant of Mount Hermon would echo through history as the moment when immortal beings chose to become mortal, when Watchers became participants, when the ordained order of creation faced its first great challenge from within. Their descent into the world of humanity was no longer just physical. It had become spiritual, emotional, and irreversible. The Forbidden Union, Daughters of Men. In the valleys below Mount Hermon, human settlements dotted the landscape like flowers in a vast garden. Here lived the daughters of men, women of beauty and grace, who had captured the attention of beings whose eyes had once gazed only upon celestial wonders. What began as observation from heavenly heights had become something deeper, more personal, more dangerous. The angels walked among humanity for the first time, their divine forms carefully veiled in flesh that could pass for mortal. Yet, something about them remained unmistakably otherworldly. They moved with a grace that seemed to defy the pull of earth. Their voices carried harmonies that mortal throats could not produce. Their eyes held depths that spoke of knowledge beyond human comprehension. Women were drawn to them as flowers turned toward the sun. These beings offered something that human men could not: a love that carried the intensity of heaven itself, attention that felt like divine blessing, protection that seemed absolute and eternal. The daughters of men found themselves swept up in romances that transcended anything their kind had known before. At first, the unions seemed like fairy tales made real. The angels courted their chosen women with gifts beyond imagination. They spoke of distant worlds and sang songs that made the heart soar with longing for places it had never seen. They shared visions of beauty that existed beyond the physical realm, love that transcended the boundaries of mortal understanding. Each relationship became a bridge between worlds that were never meant to connect. When an immortal being chose to love a mortal woman, both were changed by the encounter. The angels discovered emotions they had never experienced: jealousy, possessiveness, the fear of loss that comes with loving something fragile. The women found themselves elevated beyond their natural state, touched by power that transformed them on levels they could not comprehend. The forbidden nature of these unions only intensified their passion. Heaven had not sanctioned these relationships. Divine law had been clear about the separation that must be maintained between celestial and terrestrial beings. Yet love, or what the angels believed to be love, had proven stronger than cosmic order. As the relationships deepened, the angels began to share more than affection. They revealed secrets that had been hidden since creation's dawn. They taught their wives the true names of stars, the hidden properties of stones and herbs, the words of power that could influence reality itself. Knowledge flowed from divine minds to mortal hearts like wine from an overflowing cup. The women became more than human through these revelations. Their understanding expanded beyond natural limits. They could see further, think more clearly, influence their surroundings in ways that seemed miraculous to their neighbors. Yet with expanded awareness came the terrible weight of knowledge that mortal minds were not designed to bear. Communities began to change around these transformed women. The simple rhythms of early human life became complicated by new desires, new possibilities, new temptations. The daughters of men found themselves caught between two worlds, no longer fully human, but not yet divine. Their very existence became a challenge to the natural order. The angels, meanwhile, discovered that love was more complex than the perfect emotions they had known in heaven. Mortal hearts brought mortal complications. Their chosen women aged, even if slowly. They could be hurt, could suffer, could be lost. For beings accustomed to certainty and permanence, the fragility of mortal love became both blessing and curse. Yet from these impossible unions, something new was beginning to stir. life was forming that would carry the blood of both heaven and earth. The women who had captured angels' hearts now carried within them the seeds of a new kind of being, children who would inherit both mortal flesh and divine essence. The forbidden had become reality. The impossible was taking shape in human wombs. The daughters of men were about to become mothers to a race that had never before existed in all of creation's long history. Birth of the Nephilim. The birthing chambers echoed with sounds that had never before been heard on earth. The cries of women in labor mixed with something else, a resonance that seemed to come from beyond the physical world. The children being born carried within them the essence of two realms, and their very existence sent ripples through the fabric of reality. The first Nephilim emerged larger than any human child had ever been. Their mothers, strengthened by angelic power, survived births that would have been impossible for ordinary women. Yet even these enhanced human forms were strained to their limits by what they brought into the world. The children of angels demanded more from their mothers than mortal flesh was designed to give. From their earliest moments, the Nephilim displayed abilities that marked them as different. Their infant eyes held awareness that seemed ancient, as though they remembered things from before their birth. They grew with supernatural speed, reaching the size of adult humans while still children in years. Their strength exceeded that of grown men while they appeared to be mere youths. But size was only the most obvious of their gifts. The Nephilim possessed minds that could grasp concepts their human relatives struggled to understand. They learned languages without teaching, mastered skills through observation alone, and demonstrated understanding of natural laws that their father's angelic knowledge had made accessible to them. As they matured, the hybrid nature of their existence became both blessing and curse. They could commune with forces that humans could not perceive, manipulate matter in ways that seemed miraculous, and access memories that belonged to their celestial heritage. Yet they remained bound to physical forms that, despite their enhancements, were still fundamentally mortal. The Nephilim's appetites matched their size and abilities. They required more food than human communities could easily provide, more stimulation than simple human society could offer, more challenges than the peaceful world of their time contained. Their very presence began to strain the resources and social structures of early human civilization. More troubling still were their emotional needs. The Nephilim inherited their father's capacity for intense feeling, but lacked the divine nature that provided angels with perfect self-control. Love became obsession, anger became rage, curiosity became compulsion. They experienced human emotions amplified by divine intensity, a combination that proved dangerous for both themselves and those around them. Some of the Nephilim showed remarkable wisdom and used their gifts to benefit human communities. They became leaders and teachers, sharing their inherited knowledge in ways that advanced human understanding of medicine, agriculture, and natural philosophy. These giants walked among humanity as benevolent rulers, using their power to protect and guide their smaller relatives. Others, however, found different expressions for their hybrid nature. The combination of supernatural ability with unrestrained appetite led some Nephilim down darker paths. They began to see humans not as relatives to protect, but as resources to exploit. Their needs became demands, their desires became commands that few could refuse. The world began to reshape itself around these new beings. Human settlements either flourished under the protection of benevolent Nephilim or suffered under the domination of those who chose tyranny. The simple equality that had once characterized human relationships gave way to hierarchies based on power rather than wisdom or age. The angelic fathers watched their offspring with mixtures of pride and growing concern. These children embodied their rebellion's success, proof that the boundaries between heaven and earth could indeed be crossed. Yet they also revealed the unintended consequences of divine mortal union. The Nephilim were magnificent, but they were also dangerous in ways their creators had not foreseen. The earth itself seemed to respond to their presence. The careful balance that had sustained the world since creation began to shift under the influence of beings who were neither fully natural nor completely divine. The age of innocence was ending, replaced by an era of power, knowledge, and the complex moral challenges that came with both. The secrets of heaven are spilled. Azazel stood before a gathering of humans, his hands working metal with impossible skill. The ore responded to his touch as clay responds to a potter, flowing into shapes that mortal minds had never conceived. What had taken heaven's forges eons to perfect, he now taught to creatures barely removed from their creation. The knowledge of metallurgy passed from divine intelligence to human curiosity in a single afternoon. The sounds of hammering soon echoed across valleys that had known only the gentle rhythms of agricultural life. Bronze gave way to iron, iron to steel, steel to alloys whose properties seemed to bend the laws of nature. Weapons emerged from these new forges, swords that could cleave stone, spears that flew with unerring accuracy, armor that turned aside blows that would have shattered bone. But metalwork was only the beginning. Across the ancient world, other fallen angels opened their mouths to share secrets that were never meant for mortal tongues. Penemu gathered scribes around him and revealed the art of writing, showing how thoughts could be captured in symbols that would outlast memory and death. Human minds, suddenly able to preserve and share knowledge across generations, began to accelerate their development at unprecedented rates. Kazdai lifted his eyes to the night sky and began to name the stars, not with the simple designations humans had given them, but with their true celestial names. He revealed the hidden movements of planets, the secret influences that flowed from cosmic bodies to earthly events. Astrology was born as humans learned to read the heavens like a vast scroll containing the secrets of time and fate. The knowledge flowed like water through a broken dam. Barakul taught the mysteries of lightning and weather, showing humans how to predict storms and harness the power of the winds. Kokabel revealed the positions of the stars and their hidden meanings, opening human eyes to navigation techniques that would carry them across previously uncharted seas. Women gathered around angels who shared different kinds of forbidden wisdom. They learned the arts of beautification, how to enhance their natural appearance with cosmetics made from minerals and plants whose properties had been known only in heaven. They discovered dyes that could create colors more vibrant than anything nature produced naturally, perfumes that could stir emotions with supernatural intensity. The cascade of revelation transformed human society with breathtaking speed. Communities that had remained essentially unchanged for generations suddenly found themselves with access to knowledge that revolutionized every aspect of their existence. Agriculture advanced by millennia in mere decades. Architecture soared beyond previous limitations. Art and music reached levels of complexity and beauty that reflected their creators' exposure to celestial standards. Yet, with each secret revealed, something fundamental about human nature began to change. The innocence that had characterized early humanity could not survive the acquisition of knowledge that carried moral weight. The ability to create weapons inevitably led to questions about their use. The power to influence others through cosmetics and potions raised issues of manipulation and deception. The angels had intended to elevate humanity through their gifts, but they discovered that knowledge without wisdom could become a burden rather than a blessing. The humans who received divine secrets found themselves capable of actions their ancestors could never have imagined, actions that were not always beneficial to themselves or their communities. Some among humanity began to use their new abilities for personal gain rather than common good. The knowledge of metals enabled the creation not just of tools, but of chains for binding enemies. The understanding of herbs led not only to medicine, but to poisons that could strike down rivals in secret. The arts of beautification became tools for manipulation and control. The earth itself seemed to struggle under the weight of accelerated development. Landscapes changed as humans learned to extract metals from deep within the ground, to alter the courses of rivers for their convenience, to reshape forests and mountains according to their desires. The harmony that had once existed between humanity and nature began to fracture under the pressure of applied divine knowledge. Heaven watched with growing alarm as the careful balance of creation tilted toward chaos. The secrets that had taken eons to develop in the celestial realm were being compressed into human experience at a rate that threatened to overwhelm the very foundations of mortal existence. The reign of the giants. The Nephilim no longer hid their nature. Across the ancient world, these children of angels and humans rose to positions of power that their abilities made inevitable. Standing twice the height of ordinary humans, possessing strength that could topple trees and wisdom inherited from celestial minds, they became the rulers of a world unprepared for their dominion. Cities grew around them, like flowers around mighty oaks. The Nephilim did not simply govern, they reshaped civilization according to their enhanced understanding and supernatural needs. Massive stone structures rose from the earth, their construction requiring techniques that would not be rediscovered by purely human cultures for thousands of years. These were not merely buildings, but monuments to hybrid ambition. Each giant established domains that reflected their individual nature and inherited gifts. Some created centers of learning where human students gathered to receive filtered versions of angelic knowledge. These Nephilim became philosopher kings, ruling through demonstrated wisdom and genuine care for their smaller subjects. Under their guidance, human understanding of medicine, astronomy, and natural philosophy advanced by centuries in single generations. Others followed different paths. The combination of supernatural power with unrestrained appetite led certain Nephilim to view humanity not as younger siblings to be protected, but as resources to be consumed. These giants demanded tribute that strained human communities to their breaking point. Their appetites grew beyond what the earth could naturally provide, forcing innovations in agriculture and hunting that began to disrupt natural balances. The darker aspects of Nephilim rule gradually overshadowed the beneficial ones. Giants whose inherited angelic memories included knowledge of pleasure and sensation began to explore earthly experiences with an intensity that mortals could not match. Their celebrations became legendary for their excess, their feasts for their abundance, their desires for their complexity and power. Some Nephilim discovered that their enhanced nature made ordinary human food insufficient for their needs. They began to consume not just the flesh of animals, but to develop appetites that horrified their human relatives. The line between sustenance and predation blurred, as certain giants found that only the most extreme experiences could satisfy their hybrid nature. Their influence spread through human society like ripples from stones cast into still water. Communities competed to serve the most powerful Nephilim, offering tribute and allegiance in exchange for protection. Trade routes developed to supply the giants' needs, carrying exotic foods and materials across distances that had previously seemed impossible to traverse. Yet the reign of the Nephilim contained the seeds of its own destruction. Their enhanced abilities came with enhanced needs, and those needs grew with each passing generation. What had begun as benevolent rule gradually transformed into a system of exploitation that drained the resources and spirit of purely human communities. The giants began to war among themselves as their territories expanded and their appetites conflicted. These were not human conflicts, but battles between beings whose strength could level mountains and whose inherited knowledge included the secrets of warfare learned in heaven's most ancient conflicts. The earth shook under the impact of their struggles. Humanity found itself caught between competing Nephilim factions, forced to choose sides in conflicts they could barely comprehend. The simple agricultural communities that had characterized pre-flood civilization gave way to militarized societies organized around serving and surviving their giant overlords. The natural world began to rebel against the changes imposed upon it. Rivers ran red not just with clay, but with the aftermath of supernatural conflicts. Forests that had stood for millennia were cleared to feed the giants' construction projects. Animals fled regions where the balance between predator and prey had been shattered by appetites that nature had never designed to satisfy. Some among humanity began to cry out against their circumstances, calling upon the heaven that had created them to witness what the earth had become. These voices rose like incense, carrying tales of oppression and chaos to divine ears that had been watching with growing concern. The reign of the giants had transformed the world from paradise into something far more complex and dangerous. The earth that had once been a garden was becoming a battlefield, and the innocent children of creation were caught in the middle of a conflict between powers they could neither fully understand nor effectively resist. The earth cries out, The very ground seemed to groan under the weight of what the world had become. Where once fertile fields had stretched toward distant horizons, the earth now bore scars from conflicts between beings whose strength could reshape landscapes. The soil that had willingly yielded crops to gentle human hands grew reluctant to support communities strained by the demands of their supernatural rulers. Rivers that had flowed clear and pure for millennia began to run differently. Some carried the red stain of conflicts that had spilled more than human blood. Others changed course entirely, diverted by Nephilim engineering projects that served the giants' needs, while disrupting ecosystems that had maintained perfect balance since creation's dawn. The animals were the first to sense the fundamental wrongness that had entered the world. Creatures that had once approached humans without fear now fled at the scent of settlements influenced by angelic knowledge. The natural harmony between hunter and prey, between predator and the hunted, fractured under the pressure of appetites that belonged to neither earth nor heaven. Ancient forests began to wither not from disease or drought, but from something deeper, a spiritual poison that seeped into the very essence of growing things. Trees that had witnessed the first sunrise now dropped their leaves out of season, their roots struggling to draw sustenance from soil that seemed to reject the unnatural influences flowing through it. The winds themselves carried a different quality, tinged with sounds that had never before existed in the natural world. The harmonious songs that birds had sung since creation gave way to harsh cries that spoke of confusion and distress. Even the insects seemed affected, their simple patterns of life disrupted by forces they could neither understand nor adapt to. Human communities found themselves caught between the Earth's growing rebellion and the demands of their Nephilim overlords. Crops failed not from natural causes, but from the ground's apparent refusal to support the systems that had grown up around serving the giants. Springs that had never run dry began to fail, forcing migrations that brought different groups into conflict with each other. The most sensitive among humanity began to experience dreams filled with images of cosmic imbalance. They saw visions of the earth as a living entity writhing in distress, crying out for relief from burdens it was never meant to bear. These dreamers became prophets of doom, warning their communities that the current path led only to destruction. Some humans began to remember stories from their earliest generations, tales of a time when the world had been different, when the relationship between heaven and earth had followed patterns that brought blessing rather than curse. These memories stirred longings for a return to the ancient ways, though few could imagine how such a restoration might be possible. The corruption was not merely physical, but moral and spiritual. The knowledge that the fallen angels had shared with humanity carried ethical implications that mortal minds struggled to process. The ability to create weapons led inevitably to questions about their use. The power to manipulate natural forces raised issues about the proper relationship between created beings and their environment. Children born into this changed world knew nothing of the paradise their ancestors had experienced. To them, the groaning of the earth seemed natural, the conflicts between giants normal, the exploitation of human labor by supernatural beings simply the way existence worked. Yet even they sometimes felt stirrings of something different, ancestral memories that spoke of a better way. The cries that rose from the earth were more than metaphor. They were literal vibrations in the spiritual realm, distress signals that carried through dimensions beyond the physical. The harmony that had characterized creation since its beginning was being replaced by discord that reached all the way to the throne of heaven itself. In celestial halls where perfect order had reigned since before time began, the sounds of earthly anguish could no longer be ignored. The rebellion of the Watchers had produced consequences that threatened not just human civilization, but the fundamental stability of creation itself. The Earth's cries for justice and relief had reached ears that had the power to respond. Above the chaos and corruption, above the struggles of humanity and the appetites of giants, divine attention began to focus on the world with an intensity that promised change. The age of unchecked rebellion was drawing to a close, and the cosmos itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of what would come next. The judgment of the Watchers. In the highest heavens, where time moves differently and space bends according to divine will, a council convened that would reshape the destiny of both Earth and the rebellious angels who had made it their home. The throne room itself seemed to pulse with an authority that could unmake worlds with a single word, yet the judgment that began to unfold carried the careful precision of perfect justice. Michael the archangel stood before the divine presence, his sword already humming with the power that would be needed to carry out heaven's decree. Beside him, Gabriel prepared to bear messages that would echo through both celestial and terrestrial realms. Raphael readied his healing powers, knowing that the coming judgment would require restoration as much as punishment. The charges against the Watchers were read in voices that made the foundations of reality tremble. They had abandoned their assigned roles, violated the sacred boundaries between heaven and earth, and introduced knowledge that had corrupted both human innocence and natural order. Their offspring had become tyrants and predators. Their teachings had led to violence and exploitation. Their very presence had thrown creation out of balance. Yet the judgment that followed carried more sorrow than anger. These were not mere rebels, but angels who had served faithfully for eons before their fall. Their crime was not hatred of good, but misguided love. Love that had led them to choices that brought suffering rather than blessing to those they sought to help. The sentence was pronounced with finality that allowed no appeal. The Watchers would be bound in chains of spiritual darkness, imprisoned in places beyond the reach of light or comfort. They would remain conscious of their fate, but powerless to escape it, able to witness the consequences of their actions, but unable to intervene or make amends. Some would be cast into deep valleys filled with eternal flame, their immortal essence tormented by fires that burned without consuming. Others would be bound beneath mountains, their strength turned against them as they struggled forever against bonds that grew stronger with each attempt at escape. The most rebellious would be thrust into abyssal depths where neither time nor space followed natural law. Azazel, who had taught humanity the arts of war, would be cast into a desert place where sharp stones would pierce his form for eternity. His gift of metallurgy would become his curse, as metal instruments of torture surrounded him in endless variety. Penemu, who had revealed the secrets of writing, would find himself in a realm where words became living things that turned against their creator. The judgment extended beyond the angels themselves to their offspring and the world they had corrupted. The Nephilim, despite their mixed heritage, could not be permitted to continue their reign over humanity. Their very existence represented a violation of natural law that threatened the stability of creation itself. Yet their fate would be different from that of their fathers. Being part mortal, the giants could not be imprisoned in the same way as pure angels. Instead, they would face a different kind of ending, one that honored their human heritage while acknowledging the impossibility of allowing their continued existence. The earth itself would be cleansed, and in that cleansing, the hybrid race would find its conclusion. But the divine judgment carried mercy alongside justice. From among humanity, one family would be preserved, a line that had remained pure despite the corruption surrounding it. Through this family, the human race would continue beyond the coming catastrophe, carrying forward the best of what they had been while leaving behind the worst of what they had become. The agents of judgment received their instructions with the same perfect obedience that had always characterized heavenly service. Michael would bind the rebellious watchers, Gabriel would warn the righteous of what was coming, Raphael would prepare healing for the world that would emerge from the coming storm. Each archangel's role was precisely defined and absolutely necessary for the restoration of cosmic order. As the heavenly court prepared to execute its decree, one final element remained to be addressed. Among humanity walked a man whose righteousness had caught divine attention, one who might serve as an intermediary between the condemned angels and their celestial judges. This man would carry messages that no other mortal could bear, witness scenes that would break ordinary minds, and record testimonies that would echo through the ages. The wheels of divine justice began to turn with the inexorable power of cosmic law. What had been set in motion by the Watchers' rebellion would now find its conclusion in judgment that restored the proper order of creation. The age of giants and fallen angels was drawing to its close, but not before one final chapter would be written by a human scribe chosen to record the end of the world as it had been. Enoch, the scribe of judgment. Among all humanity, one man walked differently. Enoch moved through the world with purpose that others could not grasp. While his neighbors tended flocks and planted seeds, he gazed upward. The heavens called to him in ways that defied simple understanding. The chaos below had reached a breaking point. Giants roamed the earth, their appetites endless. The sons of the Watchers consumed everything in their path. Blood soaked the ground. Creation itself groaned under the weight of corruption. Something had to change. Heaven noticed Enoch's pure heart. More than just another human, he carried within him the ability to bridge two worlds. His feet touched earth, yet his spirit could ascend beyond the clouds. The divine realm saw in him what they needed most, a messenger who could speak to both sides. The call came like thunder, wrapped in whispers. One moment Enoch stood among his people. The next, he found himself lifted beyond mortal understanding. Angels surrounded him, their forms blazing with light that should have destroyed human eyes. Yet he remained whole, protected by divine grace. The journey upward revealed layers of existence hidden from earthly view. 7 heavens stretched above, each more magnificent than the last. Gardens of crystal flowers bloomed in eternal spring. Rivers of light flowed between realms where time held no meaning. Music beyond human comprehension filled every space with harmony that made the heart weep with joy. At the throne of the Most High, Enoch received his commission. The Watchers had broken cosmic law. Their children threatened to unravel creation itself. Justice demanded action, yet mercy still hoped for redemption. Enoch would carry the final message to the fallen ones. His words would determine their fate. The scribe of heaven now held responsibility for judgment itself. Enoch accepted this burden, knowing that some truths cut deeper than any sword. The fallen angels awaited their sentence, and through him, heaven would speak its final word. The visions came in waves, future floods, burning cities, nations yet unborn. Enoch saw the long arc of history stretching ahead like a scroll unrolling through time. Within these glimpses lay the consequences of the Watchers' rebellion, rippling through generations like stones cast into still water. When Enoch descended back to earth, he carried with him knowledge that no mortal was meant to bear. The weight of divine secrets pressed against his human mind. Yet he endured for the sake of those who would come after. His book would preserve these truths for generations who needed to understand what had been lost. The fallen Watchers gathered when they heard of Enoch's return. Their once glorious forms now carried the stain of their choices. Azazel stood among them, his gifts of forbidden knowledge having corrupted countless souls. Semjaza, their leader, bore the heaviest burden of guilt for the oath that had damned them all. Enoch spoke the words that heaven had given him. No reprieve would come. Their punishment would stretch across ages until the final judgment. The abyss awaited them, a prison darker than the space between stars. Their children, the giants, would perish in the coming flood. Only echoes of their existence would remain. The Watchers wept when they heard their fate. These beings who had once sung praises around the divine throne now faced eternal separation from the light they had abandoned. Their tears fell like burning rain, each drop carrying the weight of infinite loss. Yet Enoch's message contained more than condemnation. Within the judgment lay threads of hope for humanity. The flood would cleanse the earth, but righteous Noah would preserve the future. New chances would come for mortals to choose wisdom over corruption. The story would continue, even after the giants fell. Through Enoch's writings, future generations would understand the price of crossing divine boundaries. His words would echo through centuries, warning of the dangers that come when created beings reach beyond their appointed place. The scribe of judgment had fulfilled his purpose, bridging heaven and earth one final time before the waters rose. The great flood begins. Rain had never fallen like this before. The first drops struck the earth with purpose beyond mere weather. Each droplet carried within it the weight of divine judgment, the tears of creation itself crying out for cleansing. The sky opened like a vast reservoir, releasing waters that had waited since the foundation of the world. Noah stood at the threshold of his great vessel, watching the last animals enter their appointed places. For years he had labored on this impossible task. His neighbors had mocked his warnings, called him mad for building a boat where no sea existed. Now their laughter died in their throats as understanding dawned too late. The ark represented more than survival, it embodied hope in physical form. Every plank of gopher wood spoke of divine mercy preserved within judgment. Every joint sealed with pitch declared that destruction would not have the final word. Within its walls, the future of creation waited in trusting silence. Beyond the safety of the ark, the world began to dissolve. The Nephilim, those mighty giants who had ruled with iron fists, now faced a power they could not overcome. Their great cities crumbled as foundations shifted beneath rising waters. Towers built to challenge heaven toppled into the growing sea. The fountains of the deep burst forth with primal force. Waters that had slept beneath the earth's crust erupted skyward, meeting the descending rain in cosmic embrace. The very structure of the world remade itself, washing away the corruption that had taken root in every corner of creation. Azazel's pupils, those humans who had learned forbidden arts, watched helplessly as their accumulated knowledge proved worthless. Sorceries could not hold back the flood. Weapons forged with angelic secrets could not cut through the rising tide. All their stolen wisdom crumbled before the simplicity of water obeying its creator's voice. The giants fought the inevitable with desperate fury. These beings who had terrorized humanity for generations now experienced terror themselves. Their massive bodies, once symbols of unchallenged power, became liabilities as the flood deepened. Swimming required grace they had never learned. Humility their nature rejected. Mountains disappeared beneath the expanding ocean. Valleys filled like bowls receiving an endless pour. The highest peaks, once thought permanent as eternity, became islands that shrank with each passing hour. The earth itself seemed to exhale in relief as the burden of corruption lifted from its shoulders. Within the ark, a different world existed. Animals that had never shared space learned to rest beside former enemies. Lions lay down with lambs not from magic, but from necessity that bred understanding. The vessel became a floating garden of peace, preserving what was pure while chaos raged outside. Noah's family witnessed the end of an age through small windows cut high in the ark's walls. They saw the last of the antediluvian world slip beneath the waters, a civilization that had reached heights of knowledge and depths of corruption in equal measure. The flood erased both achievements and abominations with equal thoroughness. The watchers, imprisoned in their dark chains, felt the waters rise above their earthly dwelling places. Their physical forms might have been beyond the flood's reach, yet their hearts broke as they watched their hybrid children perish. Every giant that fell sent waves of anguish through the fallen angel's eternal punishment. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain continued its relentless work. The rhythm became the heartbeat of a world being reborn. Each drop added to the vast baptism that would remake the earth's surface. Waters covered the highest mountains by 15 cubits, ensuring that no remnant of the corrupted age could survive. When the rain finally stopped, silence settled over the transformed world. The ark floated alone on an endless ocean that stretched beyond every horizon. Beneath those calm waters lay the bones of giants, the ruins of great cities, the remnants of humanity's first attempt at transcendence. The old world had ended, but from these waters, a new beginning would emerge. The dove Noah sent forth would soon return with an olive leaf, a sign that earth itself was ready to begin again. The flood had accomplished its purpose, cleansing creation while preserving its future. From the ark's window, Noah could see the first glimpse of tomorrow's hope breaking through yesterday's judgment. The Nephilim, after the flood. The waters receded slowly, revealing a world scrubbed clean. Valleys appeared where none had been before. New rivers carved fresh paths through virgin soil. The earth wore a different face, as if awakening from a long, troubled dream into morning clarity. Yet beneath this pristine surface, questions lingered like shadows. Noah and his family stepped onto dry ground with wonder and trepidation. Their feet touched soil that had been washed by judgment itself. Every plant that grew, every animal that roamed, carried the promise of new beginnings. The ark had preserved not just life, but the possibility of righteousness taking root in untainted ground. The giants were gone, or so it seemed. Their massive forms had perished beneath the crushing weight of divine waters. Cities built to their scale lay buried under layers of sediment and time. The tyranny of the Nephilim had ended with the flood's final wave. Creation could breathe freely once more. But bloodlines carry memories deeper than water can reach. Within Noah's sons and their wives flowed the complex heritage of humanity, pure enough to survive judgment, yet carrying traces of what had come before. The genetic echoes of antiquity would not remain silent forever. Ham's descendants spread across the earth with restless energy. They built cities and founded nations with ambition that seemed familiar to those who remembered the old world. Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, names that would echo through history, carrying within them both promise and peril. In the land that would bear Canaan's name, something stirred. The soil itself seemed to remember what had been buried beneath the flood. New giants began to appear, not the colossal Nephilim of old, but their distant cousins. Anakim walked the earth again, their stature marking them as children of a forgotten age. These post-flood giants carried themselves differently than their ancestors. The primal fury of the antediluvian Nephilim had been tempered by generations of dilution. Yet their presence spoke of mysteries that the flood had not entirely erased. They stood as living questions about the nature of corruption and redemption. Og of Bashan emerged from the mists of early history like a mountain walking among hills. His iron bed stretched 13 feet long, a monument to size that defied normal human proportions. The king of Bashan ruled with the authority of one who remembered when giants commanded the earth without challenge. The Rephaim haunted the borderlands between legend and history. Their name whispered of the dead, the shadows, the remnants of what once was mighty. They dwelt in the margins of human settlements, neither fully of this world nor entirely removed from it. Their existence posed uncomfortable questions about the permanence of divine judgment. Goliath would later stride into biblical narrative carrying weapons forged for hands larger than normal men possessed. His challenge to Israel echoed older conflicts when giants and humans contested for dominion over the earth. In his defiance lived the memory of Nephilim pride, though diluted by centuries of changing bloodlines. The Emim, the Zuzim, the Zamzumim, these names surface briefly in ancient records like bubbles rising from deep water. Each group carried the genetic signature of extraordinary size mixed with human ambition. They built cities and waged wars with the intensity of those who remembered grander times. Some scholars of ancient lore suggest that the giants' return required no miraculous intervention. The Watchers' rebellion had introduced changes into human genetics that lay dormant, waiting for the right conditions to express themselves. The flood cleansed the earth, but could not erase what had already merged with humanity's essential nature. Others propose that new Watchers descended after the flood, repeating their predecessors' mistakes on a smaller scale. These later angels, seeing the earth repopulated, could not resist the temptation to interfere once more. Their unions with human women produced giants less massive than before, yet still marked by their supernatural heritage. The presence of post-flood giants troubled those who sought to understand divine justice. If the flood had truly cleansed the earth of Nephilim corruption, how could their children walk among Noah's descendants? The answer lay hidden in the complex relationship between judgment and mercy, between divine intervention and natural consequence. Israel would encounter these remnant giants throughout their conquest of the Promised Land. Each battle against the Anakim became a struggle against the echoes of humanity's first rebellion. Victory over Goliath represented more than military triumph. It symbolized the ongoing conflict between divine order and chaotic ambition. The giants' persistence after the flood served as a reminder that some consequences outlast their causes. The Watchers' rebellion had introduced elements into creation that could not be simply washed away. Instead, they required ongoing vigilance, continuous choice, and the patient work of generations committed to righteousness over power. The Book of Giants, Lost Chronicles. Deep in the caves of Qumran, ancient scrolls waited in patient silence. Wrapped in darkness for 2,000 years, they held secrets that challenged everything scholars thought they knew about the antediluvian world. When the first fragments emerged into modern light, they spoke in voices that had been quiet since before the floodwaters rose. The Book of Giants unfolded like a nightmare preserved in parchment. Its authors had witnessed the final days of the Nephilim firsthand, recording their words and deeds with the careful precision of those who understood they were documenting the end of an age. These were not myths told around campfires, but testimony from the abyss of history. Ohia and Haya, sons of the fallen angel Shemihaza, dominated the narrative with their outsized presence. These giants possessed not just physical enormity, but minds that could grasp concepts beyond normal human comprehension. Their conversations revealed beings caught between divine heritage and earthly corruption, struggling with knowledge that brought only despair. Dreams haunted the giants in their final days. Sleep, which should have brought rest, instead delivered visions of coming destruction. Ohia saw 7 tablets cast into water, all but one dissolving into nothingness. The symbolism required no interpretation. The flood would erase nearly everything, leaving only fragments to tell the story of what had been lost. Hahia's dreams proved even more disturbing. He witnessed a great stone covering the entire earth, while an eagle flew overhead carrying tablets of warning. The giants gathered to hear his vision, their faces grave with understanding. Even beings of their power could not escape the judgment that approached like an unstoppable tide. The fragmentary nature of the surviving text mirrors the destruction it describes. Sentences break off mid-thought, leaving readers to imagine the complete scope of the giants' final conversations. Yet, within these partial phrases lies testimony more powerful than any complete narrative, the authentic voice of beings facing their own extinction. Mawe, another giant of renown, embarked on desperate journeys seeking intervention from heaven itself. His travels took him beyond the boundaries of the known world to places where the veil between realms grew thin. He sought Enoch, the human who had walked with God, hoping that divine mercy might yet spare his people from the coming catastrophe. The giants' attempts to understand their fate revealed minds grappling with concepts of justice and consequence. They had lived as gods among mortals, taking what they pleased without thought of cost. Now, faced with judgment, they struggled to comprehend how their actions had woven the very rope of their destruction. Barakel and his brothers received visits from their giant sons, who came seeking wisdom that their fathers could no longer provide. The fallen angels, bound in darkness, could offer only regret for the choices that had led to this moment. Their knowledge, once so coveted by humanity, proved worthless against the tide of divine wrath. The Book of Giants preserves fragments of actual conversations between the Nephilim and their angelic fathers. These dialogues reveal the complex relationship between the Watchers and their hybrid offspring. Love and pride mingled with horror as the fallen angels watched their children face destruction that their own rebellion had made inevitable. As the flood approached, the giants' behavior grew increasingly desperate. Some attempted to build towers that could reach above the coming waters. Others sought to preserve their knowledge in hidden repositories, hoping future generations might recover their secrets. All such efforts proved futile against the totality of divine judgment. The fragmentary nature of the text suggests that even the giants' final words were not meant to survive intact. Yet what remains carries the weight of authentic testimony from beings who bridge the gap between legend and history. Their voices echo from beyond the flood, bearing witness to truths that shape the very foundations of human civilization. Dreams of destruction gave way to the reality of rising waters. The Book of Giants ends as it began, in fragments, in darkness, in the silence of things forever lost. Yet its survival in the Dead Sea caves suggests that some truths are too important to remain buried, too essential to human understanding to disappear completely beneath the weight of time. Modern scholars debate the text's relationship to more familiar accounts in the Book of Enoch and Genesis. Yet, the giants' own words need no external validation. They speak with the authority of those who lived through history's greatest catastrophe, offering their testimony as both warning and reminder of the price that comes when created beings reach beyond their appointed boundaries. Fallen angels across cultures. The story echoes across every continent like ripples from a stone cast into the center of human memory. Different cultures speak different languages, worship different gods, yet their myths carry similar themes. Divine beings who descended from heaven, shared forbidden knowledge, and left behind hybrid children who would trouble the earth. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Apkallu walked among humanity with the bearing of beings from another realm. These fish-garbed sages brought civilization itself, writing, mathematics, the arts of building, and warfare. Sumerian tablets speak of 7 who came before the flood, their gifts transforming simple tribes into the world's first great civilization. Yet their legacy carried the same ambiguity that marked the Watcher's intervention. The Akkadian epic of Gilgamesh preserves memories of Enkidu, the wild man created by the gods to challenge the mighty king. Neither fully human nor divine, Enkidu embodied the dangerous space between realms where the Watchers had dwelt. His friendship with Gilgamesh mirrored the complex relationship between the fallen angels and humanity, intimate yet ultimately tragic. Greek mythology overflows with tales of gods who could not resist mortal women. Zeus descended in countless forms to father children who would reshape history. Perseus, Hercules, Helen of Troy, all bore the mixed blessing of divine blood flowing through human veins. The Titans, imprisoned beneath the earth for their rebellion against heaven, awaited a final battle that would determine the fate of both gods and mortals. The Gigantes of Greek lore possessed the size and fury of the biblical Nephilim. Born from Gaia's union with Uranus's spilled blood, they waged war against Mount Olympus itself. Their defeat required divine intervention on a cosmic scale, echoing the judgment that fell upon the antediluvian world. Even in defeat, their legacy lived on in the heroes and monsters that populated later myths. Hindu tradition speaks of the Asuras, divine beings who fell from grace through pride and desire. Once equal to the Devas in power and glory, they chose the path of darkness and became enemies of cosmic order. Their battles with the gods span multiple ages, each conflict reflecting the ongoing struggle between light and shadow that began with the first rebellion in heaven. The Rakshasa of Indian lore carry the genetic memory of beings who cross the boundaries between species. These shapeshifters possessed knowledge of magic and metallurgy that they shared with humans, always for a price that proved higher than expected. Their backward hands marked them as creatures who had reversed the natural order through their very existence. Celtic mythology preserves the Tuatha De Danann, the divine tribe who came to Ireland bearing 4 magical treasures. Their arrival from the Northern Isles mirrors the descent of the Watchers from heaven. They intermarried with mortal women, producing lines of heroes and kings whose supernatural abilities echoed their divine ancestry. The Nephilim of Celtic tradition became the Fomorians, ancient giants who ruled Ireland before the coming of more familiar gods. Their battles with the Tuatha De Danann preserved memories of conflicts between different orders of divine beings, each struggling for dominion over both earth and heaven. Norse mythology tells of the Jotuns, giants who possessed wisdom that even the gods coveted. Yet their knowledge came with the price of chaos, their very existence, threatening the order that the Aesir sought to maintain. Ragnarok itself would begin when these giants broke free from their bonds, echoing the apocalyptic warnings found in Enoch's visions. The Nephilim appear in Norse tradition as the offspring of giants and gods, beings whose mixed nature made them both powerful and unstable. Loki himself embodied this dangerous hybridity, capable of great cleverness and equally great destruction. His binding beneath the earth awaited a final release that would bring about the end of the world. African traditions preserve their own memories of divine teachers who descended from the sky. The Dogon people speak of the Nomo, amphibious beings who brought knowledge of astronomy and agriculture. Their gifts transformed human civilization, yet their departure left humanity struggling to maintain what they had been given without fully understanding its source. Native American cultures tell of star people who mated with earth women, producing children with abilities that surpassed normal human limits. The Hopi speak of the Kachinas, spiritual beings who taught the arts of survival and ceremony. Their eventual departure marked the end of an age when heaven and earth maintained closer contact. These parallel traditions suggest that the Watchers' rebellion was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern woven into the fabric of human experience. Every culture preserves some memory of the time when divine beings walked among mortals, sharing knowledge that transformed civilization while introducing chaos that would echo through the generations. Uh, the universality of these themes points to experiences too profound to be dismissed as mere mythology. Whether understood literally or symbolically, these stories preserve truths about the dangerous attraction between different orders of being, the price of forbidden knowledge, and the consequences that ripple through time when cosmic boundaries are crossed. The Tower of Babel and other acts of defiance. The earth spoke one language in those days after the flood. Every human voice carried the same cadence, shared the same words for hope and fear, love and loss. This unity should have brought peace, yet it bred something more dangerous: the collective ambition to challenge heaven itself. Unity, without wisdom, becomes a blade turned against its wielder. Nimrod emerged from this single-tongued world like a flame rising from kindling. His name meant rebellion, and he wore it with pride that echoed older defiances. The blood of giants flowed in his veins, diluted by generations, yet still carrying the memory of beings who had once commanded earth as gods. In him, the ancient hunger stirred anew. The plain of Shinar stretched endlessly under desert skies, its soil rich enough to support great cities. Here Nimrod gathered the scattered tribes, speaking words that kindled dreams of empire. He promised towers that would scrape the belly of heaven, walls that would contain human destiny within human control. His vision attracted followers like moths to flame. Babel rose brick by brick, each course climbing higher than the last. The tower's foundations required stones quarried from distant mountains, its mortar mixed with ambition that refused all limits. Workers sang as they labored, their unified language allowing coordination that would have been impossible in later divided times. Yet, the tower represented more than architecture. It embodied humanity's second attempt to breach the barrier between mortal and divine. The first rebellion had come through the Watcher's descent. Now mortals sought to reverse that journey, climbing upward to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The bricks themselves carried symbolic weight. Each one represented human hands shaping earth into forms that defied natural law. Clay became stronger than stone through fire and will, just as humans sought to become more than their created nature through collective effort. The very act of building became an act of transformation. At night, when work ceased, Nimrod would climb the unfinished tower to survey his growing kingdom. From those heights, the world below looked small and manageable. Cities appeared as toys, rivers as threads, people as ants moving with purpose he could barely comprehend. The perspective bred pride that grew with each additional course of stone. Heaven watched this construction with the patience of eternity, yet concern grew with each passing day. The tower itself posed no threat to divine security. No structure built by mortal hands could reach the throne of the Most High. But the attitude it represented echoed dangerous thoughts that had once corrupted angels themselves. The unified language made possible not just the tower, but the sharing of knowledge that should have remained buried beneath floodwaters. Fragments of antediluvian wisdom surfaced in conversations, passed from grandfather to grandchild like precious stones. Metallurgy, astronomy, arts of war and peace, all the gifts the Watchers had given emerged anew. Babel became more than a city. It transformed into a university of forbidden learning. Scholars gathered from across the known world, drawn by promises of wisdom that transcended normal human understanding. They sought to reconstruct the complete knowledge that the giants had possessed, believing that such wisdom would elevate them beyond their appointed station. The tower's height created its own weather patterns. Winds swirled around its peak in ways that seemed to bend natural law. Birds struggled to fly at such altitudes, yet the builders pressed higher, driven by visions of perspectives that mortal eyes were never meant to see. Each new level brought them closer to secrets that heaven had chosen to conceal. Divine intervention came not as flood or fire, but as confusion woven into the very fabric of human communication. Words that had carried clear meaning moments before became gibberish in foreign mouths. Brothers could no longer speak to brothers. Workers could no longer coordinate their efforts, and the great project ground to a halt in frustrated silence. The scattering that followed spread more than people across the earth. It dispersed the fragments of forbidden knowledge that had begun to coalesce in Babel. Each group that wandered to distant lands carried only pieces of what had once threatened to become dangerously complete. The dispersion became a mercy disguised as judgment. Yet Nimrod's defiance established a pattern that would repeat throughout history. Whenever humans gathered sufficient power and unity, the temptation would arise to challenge heaven once more. Babylon, Egypt, Rome, and countless other empires would echo Babel's ambition, each believing they could succeed where their predecessors had failed. The ruins of the tower remained as a monument to the limits of human ambition. Wind and weather would eventually claim even its foundations, yet its memory lived on in every subsequent attempt to build structures that reached beyond their maker's natural grasp. Babel had fallen, but the hunger it represented would never be completely satisfied. Languages multiplied across the earth like flowers blooming in different seasons, each carrying fragments of the original tongue that had once unified all human speech. Within this diversity lay both judgment and gift, the inability to coordinate perfect rebellion, balanced by the beauty of varied expression that enriched the human experience beyond anything uniformity could have provided. Angels in chains, where are they now? Darkness deeper than the space between stars holds the watchers in bonds forged from their own broken oaths. No light penetrates their prison, no sound disturbs their eternal silence except the echo of their own regrets. Time moves differently in this place. Moments stretch like centuries, while ages pass like single breaths. Here the fallen angels wait for a judgment that remains forever distant. The abyss itself defies human understanding. Neither fully physical nor purely spiritual, it exists in the spaces between what mortals consider real. Ancient texts describe it as a pit without bottom, a prison without walls, a darkness that cannot be measured by any scale earthly minds might comprehend. Within this impossibility, beings who once sang around the throne of heaven now dwell in perfect isolation. Azazel bears chains heavier than mountains, forged from the weapons he taught humanity to craft. Each link carries the weight of every sword that drew blood, every spear that took life, every arrow that found its mark in innocent flesh. The metals he revealed to human smiths became the very substance of his bondage, justice mirroring the nature of his crime. Semjaza, the leader who first proposed the binding oath on Mount Hermon, hangs suspended between earth and heaven, too fallen to ascend, too proud to fully descend. His punishment reflects his position as instigator of the Great Rebellion. Around him hang his followers, each bound according to their specific transgression against divine order. The teaching angels suffer torments crafted from their own gifts to humanity. Penemu, who revealed the secrets of writing, finds himself surrounded by books whose pages burn without being consumed, their words rearranging themselves into accusations that sear his consciousness. Kazbil, who shared the knowledge of war, experiences endless battles where victory and defeat become meaningless concepts. Barakel, who taught astrology, sees stars that burn backward, constellations that spell out his shame across a sky that no other eyes will ever witness. The knowledge he shared with mortals becomes a mirror reflecting his own folly, wisdom transformed into its opposite through the lens of judgment. These fallen beings retain their angelic nature despite their degradation. Their minds still possess the vast intelligence that once served heaven's purposes, yet now that capacity becomes another element of their torment. They understand perfectly the magnitude of what they have lost, the impossibility of what they threw away for temporary pleasures. Memory becomes their cruelest companion. They recall the glory of standing in the divine presence, the music of spheres that once filled their existence with harmony beyond description. Those golden moments contrast sharply with their present darkness, each beautiful recollection transformed into a source of anguish that cuts deeper than any physical pain. Some traditions speak of levels within the abyss, different degrees of punishment matching different degrees of transgression. The Watchers who merely took human wives suffered differently than those who shared forbidden knowledge. Those who actively corrupted humanity faced torments more severe than those who participated reluctantly in the Great Rebellion. Time in the abyss moves according to divine will rather than natural law. A single moment of regret might stretch across millennia, while centuries of punishment could pass in what feels like heartbeats. This temporal distortion ensures that every aspect of their crime receives full consideration. Every consequence plays out to its completion. The chains that bind the Watchers were forged before their rebellion began. Divine foreknowledge prepared their prison while they still served faithfully in heaven's courts. Their bonds waited in patient darkness, ready to receive prisoners who had not yet chosen their fate. Justice prepared for mercy's rejection. Yet even in their punishment, traces of their original glory remain. The fallen angels possess beauty that darkness cannot completely extinguish, though it becomes terrible in its corrupted form. Their voices, when they speak at all, still carry echoes of the music they once contributed to heaven's eternal song. Prophecy suggests their imprisonment will not last forever. The book of Revelation speaks of a time when the abyss will open, releasing its prisoners for a final test of creation's resolve. The Watchers' ultimate fate remains bound to humanity's destiny, their story incomplete until the last chapter of earthly history unfolds. Some scholars propose that the fallen angels experienced not just punishment, but a strange form of purification. Their suffering might serve to burn away the corruption that led to their fall, preparing them for some role in the cosmic drama yet to be revealed. Whether this represents mercy or merely another turn of justice's wheel remains hidden in divine counsel. The location of their prison transcends physical geography. It exists wherever the consequences of rebellion create separation from divine presence. In this sense, the abyss touches every corner of creation where the effects of the Watchers' choices continue to unfold. Their chains reach across time and space, binding not just their bodies, but the very legacy of their actions. Modern seekers sometimes claim to contact these imprisoned beings through various occult practices. Yet such claims ignore the absolute nature of their bondage. The Watchers cannot escape their chains to whisper secrets to mortal ears, cannot offer shortcuts to power or knowledge. Their imprisonment remains complete until heaven itself chooses to unlock their bonds. Giants in the Bible: David, Goliath, and more. The morning sun cast long shadows across the valley of Elah as two armies faced each other in deadly silence. Israel's forces trembled on one hillside while Philistine warriors jeered from the other. Between them stretched a no-man's land where honor would be tested and legends born. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through centuries of human memory. Goliath emerged from the Philistine ranks like a mountain given human form. Standing over 9 feet tall, his bronze armor caught sunlight and threw it back in blinding flashes. The spear in his hand resembled a weaver's beam, its iron point alone weighing 15 pounds. His voice boomed across the valley with the authority of one accustomed to absolute dominance. For 40 days, the giant had issued his challenge. Each morning and evening, he strode into the valley and hurled insults at Israel's God and people. His presence alone paralyzed Saul's army with terror that reached beyond rational fear. This was not merely a large warrior. This was a remnant of the old world, a genetic echo of the Nephilim who had once ruled the earth. The Philistines had cultivated these bloodlines carefully. In Gaza, Gath, Ashdod, and other cities, families bearing the marks of ancient giants maintained their heritage through selective marriages and careful genealogies. They served as living weapons, psychological warfare given human form. Goliath represented the perfection of their breeding program. David approached the battlefield with the innocent confidence of youth untested by doubt. While his brothers saw only an impossible opponent, the shepherd boy saw an opportunity to demonstrate divine faithfulness. His faith had been forged in lonely pastures where he had fought lions and bears with nothing but trust in heaven's protection. The contrast between champion and challenger revealed deeper truths about power's nature. Goliath relied on size, strength, and weapons forged by human hands. His confidence rested in measurable advantages that any observer could calculate. David's strength came from sources that could not be weighed or measured, the covenant promises of an invisible God. When David selected 5 smooth stones from the brook, he chose weapons that seemed laughably inadequate against bronze armor and iron spear points. Yet, these simple rocks carried within them the accumulated power of all creation, guided by hands that had learned precision through years of protecting helpless sheep from natural predators. The sling itself represented ancient technology, deceptively simple yet devastatingly effective in skilled hands. Shepherds had used such weapons for generations, their accuracy developed through countless hours of practice in empty fields. What appeared primitive to armored warriors could deliver stones with the force of modern bullets. Goliath's final moments revealed the fragility that lurked beneath his massive exterior. The stones struck his forehead with divine precision, finding the one spot where his armor provided no protection. His great size, so intimidating in life, became a liability as he crashed to earth with the finality of a felled tree. David's victory over Goliath was not the first encounter between Israel and the giant clans. Joshua's conquest of Canaan had required systematic warfare against the Anakim, those towering descendants of the Nephilim who had survived the flood. Hebron, Debir, and Ab had been cleansed of their giant inhabitants through campaigns that required divine assistance. The three sons of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, had ruled the hill country around Hebron with the authority of their supernatural heritage. Their very names struck fear into the hearts of ordinary humans. Only Caleb, one of the faithful spies, possessed courage enough to claim that territory as his inheritance. His faith proved stronger than their giant stature. Og of Bashan represented another branch of the post-flood giant bloodline. His kingdom stretched across the fertile lands east of Jordan, his iron bed measuring 13.5 feet long. The dimensions of his sleeping place spoke volumes about the physical reality of his enormous frame. Yet even this mighty king fell before Israel's advance when divine favor supported their cause. The Rephaim haunted the borderlands like living memories of the antediluvian age. Their name carried connotations of the dead, the shades, the remnants of what once possessed terrible power. They dwelt in the valley that would later bear their name, their presence a constant reminder that the flood had not completely erased the Watcher's legacy from the earth. Later encounters with giants dotted Israel's history like recurring nightmares. The Philistine champions who followed Goliath carried his genetic heritage in their oversized frames. Ishbi-Benob wielded a bronze spear weighing 300 shekels, while Saph and others continued the tradition of giant warriors challenging Israel's God through mortal combat. These biblical accounts preserve more than ancient warfare. They document humanity's ongoing struggle with the consequences of cosmic rebellion. Each giant represented a question about divine justice, a test of faith and promises that transcended physical reality. Victory over these remnant Nephilim proved that heaven's power could overcome any earthly advantage. The giants' weapons and armor became trophies in Israel's temples, physical proof of victories that seemed impossible to natural reasoning. Goliath's sword found its way to the sanctuary at Nob, where it waited to serve David again in his flight from Saul. These artifacts connected present faith to past triumphs, encouraging future generations to trust beyond what their eyes could see. The pattern established in these encounters would repeat throughout Israel's history. Whenever the nation faced enemies that seemed too powerful to defeat, the memory of David and Goliath would stir courage in faithful hearts. The shepherd boy's victory became a template for understanding how divine strength operates through human weakness. Yet the giants' presence in biblical narrative serves a larger purpose than mere military history. They represent the persistent challenge that corrupted power poses to divine order. Each encounter forced Israel to choose between trust in God's promises or capitulation to seemingly superior force. These choices shaped the nation's character and destiny. The final disappearance of the biblical giants marked the end of an era that had begun with the Watchers' rebellion. Their bloodlines, diluted by centuries of intermarriage, eventually faded into the general human population. Yet their legacy lived on in stories that reminded future generations of the price paid when created beings reached beyond their appointed boundaries. Apocryphal rebellions. More fallen, more secrets. Beyond the familiar names of the first fallen lay other angels, whose stories whispered through texts hidden from common view. These later rebels carried their own burdens of knowledge too dangerous for mortal minds, their own tales of desire that led to damnation. The rebellion that began with the Watchers spread like ripples across heaven's hierarchy, touching beings whose very existence challenged human understanding. Penemu had served as heaven's scribe before his fall, his hands crafting the very letters that would later become humanity's written language. His rebellion came not from lust for mortal women, but from pride in his own intellectual gifts. He believed that knowledge belonged to all created beings, that wisdom should flow freely between heaven and earth without divine restriction. When Penemu descended, he brought with him the arts of ink and paper, the secrets of preserving thought in permanent form. His gift transformed human civilization more profoundly than weapons or metallurgy ever could. Writing allowed knowledge to accumulate across generations, wisdom to compound interest like gold in a miser's vault. Yet with literacy came the ability to record not just truth, but lies dressed in truth's clothing. False prophecies could be preserved alongside genuine visions. Deceptions could be passed down through generations with the same authority as divine revelations. Penemu's gift carried within it the seeds of its own corruption. Casbiel brought different knowledge to humanity, the understanding of sacred oaths and binding rituals. His expertise lay in the mystical connections between word and reality, the power that transformed mere speech into cosmic law. Before his fall, he had helped maintain the very bonds that held creation together. The rituals Casbiel taught allowed humans to tap into spiritual forces beyond their natural reach. They learned to bind spirits, compel obedience from invisible powers, and manipulate the unseen currents that flowed through all existence. These practices gave mortals access to abilities that blurred the line between human and divine. Romuald had governed the realm of dreams in heaven's administration, guiding the visions that came to sleeping minds. His rebellion stemmed from fascination with the boundary between consciousness and the void, the mysterious space where souls touched eternity each night. He chose to explore those borderlands without permission from higher authority. Through Romuald's teaching, humans learned to navigate the dream realm with intention rather than merely experiencing it passively. They discovered how to seek visions, interpret symbols, and use sleep as a gateway to hidden knowledge. Yet this gift came with terrible risks. The dreaming mind could encounter entities that were never meant to touch human consciousness. Kokabeel controlled the movements of stars and planets before his descent into rebellion. His knowledge encompassed the vast clockwork of celestial mechanics, the invisible forces that governed the dance of heavenly bodies. He understood how stellar positions influenced earthly events, how cosmic rhythms shaped mortal destinies. The astrology Kokabeel shared with humanity revealed patterns hidden within apparent chaos. Mortals learned to read their fates in planetary movements, to time important actions according to stellar configurations, to understand their place within the vast cosmic order. This knowledge elevated human consciousness, but also burdened it with awareness of forces beyond mortal control. Sariel's domain had been the realm of pure spirit, the management of souls in their journey between life and death. His rebellion came from compassion that exceeded divine boundaries. He could not bear to watch human spirits suffer ignorance of their true nature and destiny. His mercy became the instrument of his downfall. The secrets Sariel revealed concerned the soul's hidden powers, its ability to transcend physical limitations through will and knowledge. He taught humans to commune directly with spiritual beings, to project consciousness beyond the body's confines, to manipulate the life force that animated all creation. These abilities made mortals into apprentice gods. Turiel's expertise lay in natural forces, the power locked within stone and stream, wind and flame. Before his fall, he had supervised the elemental energies that sustained physical creation. His rebellion arose from desire to share nature's deepest secrets with beings he considered worthy of such knowledge. Under Turiel's guidance, humans learned to command fire without fuel, to call wind without weather, to shape stone like clay, and direct water's flow against its natural course. They discovered the hidden names by which all natural forces could be controlled, the secret harmonies that could remake physical reality according to human will. These secondary rebellions created a cascade of consequences that rippled through both heaven and earth. Each fallen angel brought unique gifts that transformed human civilization in ways both wonderful and terrible. Their combined influence accelerated humanity's development far beyond what natural evolution would have allowed. The texts that preserve these stories often contradict each other in details while agreeing on essential themes. Different traditions name different angels, assign different specialties, describe different methods of rebellion. Yet all agree that the corruption spread beyond the original Watchers, encompassing beings whose very existence had maintained cosmic order. Modern scholars debate whether these later falls represent historical events or symbolic descriptions of how forbidden knowledge entered human consciousness. Yet, the practical effects remain the same. Capabilities that should have remained in heaven's exclusive domain became available to mortal minds unprepared for their responsible use. The books containing these secrets were themselves hidden, their knowledge considered too dangerous for general circulation. Only initiates who had proven their wisdom and restraint gained access to the complete teachings. Yet even these precautions could not prevent the gradual seepage of dangerous knowledge into broader human awareness. The fallen angels' gifts continued to influence human development long after their imprisonment. The arts they had taught became foundations for entire civilizations. Their secrets, passed down through carefully guarded traditions, shaped the thinking of philosophers, magicians, and scientists who never suspected the supernatural origin of their knowledge. The return of the days of Noah, Christ's words, carried across centuries with the weight of prophecy fulfilled and yet to be fulfilled. His warning about the end times echoed with memories of humanity's first judgment, as it was in the days of Noah, so it would be again when the Son of Man appeared. The patterns established before the flood would repeat themselves, though perhaps in forms that ancient eyes could barely imagine. Noah's generation had known prosperity beyond measure. The antediluvian world possessed knowledge that made their lives easier, their cities grander, their appetites more easily satisfied. Technology served comfort, wisdom accumulated in great libraries, and human achievement reached heights that seemed to promise unlimited progress. Yet beneath this golden surface, corruption grew like cancer in healthy tissue. The union between divine and mortal had produced more than hybrid giants. It created a culture where boundaries meant nothing, where desire justified any action, where power determined right and wrong. Natural law bent before supernatural intervention, yet the results brought chaos rather than order. Progress became regress, disguised in appealing forms. Jesus spoke to disciples whose world already showed signs of similar patterns. Roman engineering created marvels that rivaled antediluvian achievements. Greek philosophy promised wisdom that transcended traditional limits. Religious syncretism blended divine and human in ways that echoed the Watchers' original transgression. The future would amplify these trends beyond recognition. Marriage in Noah's time had lost its sacred character, becoming merely a social contract subject to convenience and desire. The divine pattern of one man, one woman, one covenant lifetime was abandoned in favor of arrangements that served appetite rather than purpose. This breakdown weakened the very foundation of human society. The eating and drinking that characterized the pre-flood world went beyond normal nourishment to become obsessive pursuits of pleasure. Feasts stretched for days, wines fermented with knowledge stolen from heaven, delicacies prepared from creatures that were never meant to serve human appetite. Consumption became a form of worship, with physical satisfaction as the only recognized deity. Commerce in Noah's era operated without moral constraints. The knowledge taught by fallen angels created products that served human desire without consideration of long-term consequences. Markets traded in things that should never have been bought or sold. Knowledge, power, even human life itself became commodities valued only for their exchange potential. The normalcy that Jesus emphasized proved most disturbing of all. People lived their daily lives without awareness that judgment approached like a rising tide. They made plans for tomorrow while foundations crumbled beneath today. The very ordinariness of their activities concealed extraordinary corruption that demanded extraordinary response. Warning voices sounded in Noah's day, but the prosperous majority dismissed them as religious extremism. Noah's preaching fell on ears deafened by comfort, hearts hardened by self-satisfaction. The ark's construction became a local curiosity rather than a call to repentance. Human nature preferred pleasant lies to uncomfortable truths. Jesus' prophecy suggested that similar blindness would characterize the generation that witnessed his return. Despite clear signs, despite mounting evidence of approaching judgment, people would continue their routines with the same oblivious confidence that had marked Noah's contemporaries. Normalcy would mask catastrophe until the moment when hiding became impossible. The sudden nature of the end would catch the unprepared completely off guard. Just as the flood came without final warning, just as the door of the ark closed while scoffers still mocked outside, so the day of judgment would arrive while most of humanity remained focused on immediate concerns. Tomorrow's plans would be interrupted by eternity's demands. Yet Jesus' warning contained hope alongside its sobering message. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and his family received salvation through faith expressed in obedient action. The righteous would not be forgotten when judgment fell. Divine mercy would preserve those who walked with God despite their generation's corruption. The parallel between Noah's day and the end times suggested that similar supernatural activity would mark the final generation. Angels, or beings masquerading as angels, would once again interfere in human affairs. Knowledge that should remain hidden would be revealed to minds unprepared for its implications. The boundaries between heaven and earth would blur in dangerous ways. Modern observers point to developments that seem to echo these ancient patterns. Genetic engineering promises to reshape human nature itself. Artificial intelligence threatens to create beings more intelligent than their creators. Communication technology enables global coordination that could facilitate either unprecedented good or unparalleled evil. The tools exist for another antediluvian moment, yet the comparison cuts both ways. If the end times will mirror Noah's day, then those who heed the warning can prepare like Noah did. Faith expressing itself through practical obedience can build arcs of safety in whatever form divine guidance provides. The righteous need not fear judgment that was never intended for them. The days of Noah serve as both warning and comfort. Warning for those who choose corruption, comfort for those who choose righteousness. History's patterns reveal divine consistency, yet within those patterns lie opportunities for different choices, different outcomes. The flood destroyed the old world but preserved the foundation for new beginnings. Christ's reference to Noah established a framework for understanding both past and future. The same God who judged the antediluvian world would judge the final generation. The same mercy that saved Noah's family would preserve those who trusted divine promises above human wisdom. As it was, so it would be, both in judgment and in salvation. The bloodlines and secret societies deep beneath the surface of recorded history lies a whisper that refuses to fade. Royal families across Europe trace their lineage through carefully guarded records, each generation marking bloodlines that stretch back beyond memory. These ancient genealogies carry weight beyond mere ancestry. They speak of divine right, of blood that flows differently through chosen veins. The concept emerges not from modern conspiracy, but from ancient belief systems that viewed certain bloodlines as touched by otherworldly influence. Medieval courts understood kingship as more than political power. Rulers claimed descent from gods, from angels, from beings who once walked between heaven and earth. This wasn't mere propaganda. These beliefs shaped the very foundations of governance across civilizations. When we examine the ruling houses of antiquity, patterns begin to surface. Egyptian pharaohs declared themselves children of the gods. Roman emperors claimed divine ancestry. European monarchs insisted on divine appointment. Each culture maintained strict bloodline preservation, viewing intermarriage outside certain circles as contamination rather than alliance. The Merovingian dynasty of France presents one of history's most intriguing examples. Their chronicles speak of supernatural origins, of a bloodline that carried both blessing and curse. Court records describe unusual traits among family members, exceptional height, strange abilities, mysterious knowledge that seemed to emerge without teaching. These weren't isolated accounts, but consistent patterns documented across generations. Secret societies emerged around the protection and guidance of these bloodlines. The Knights Templar, beyond their public mission, guarded ancient knowledge about lineages and their significance. Their sudden dissolution and persecution suggests they possessed information that threatened established religious and political order. Documents discovered centuries later hint at genealogical records that mapped connections between ruling families and beings described in apocryphal texts. Freemasonry developed elaborate systems around the concept of ancient wisdom, preserved through bloodlines. Their degrees and rituals speak of master builders, of knowledge passed down from Solomon's temple, of secrets that transform understanding of human nature itself. The symbolism points consistently toward beings who taught forbidden arts to early humanity. Modern genetic research adds new dimensions to these ancient beliefs. Scientists now recognize that human DNA carries markers of ancient mixing, evidence of genetic material that doesn't fit standard evolutionary models. While researchers debate the implications, the data supports the possibility that human bloodlines were influenced by non-human genetic material in prehistory. The preservation of certain bloodlines takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Rather than simple elitism, bloodline protection might represent attempts to maintain genetic heritage that carries specific traits or abilities. Royal families' obsession with genealogy transforms from vanity into deliberate genetic preservation programs spanning millennia. Contemporary elite families continue these patterns. Intermarriage remains common within certain circles, creating genetic isolation that maintains distinct characteristics. Wealth and power flow along family lines that trace back through documented genealogies to ancient ruling houses. The influence these families wield extends far beyond their apparent numbers. Banking dynasties like the Rothschilds maintain detailed family trees connect to European royalty. Industrial magnates trace their lineages through carefully preserved records. Political dynasties pass power through bloodlines rather than merit alone. These patterns suggest systematic preservation of genetic heritage that carries significance beyond social status. The question arises, what exactly are these bloodlines preserving? Ancient texts describe the Nephilim as beings of exceptional size, intelligence, and ability. They ruled as kings and taught advanced knowledge to early civilizations. If remnants of their genetic heritage survived, preservation of those bloodlines would make strategic sense for maintaining power and influence across generations. Secret societies serve as guardians of this knowledge, creating networks that span centuries and continents. They provide continuity when political systems change, preserving bloodlines and their associated secrets through periods of upheaval. Their rituals and symbols maintain connection to ancient knowledge while concealing its true nature from outsiders. The Watchers and the Occult Revival. The Renaissance brought more than artistic awakening. Hidden within its cultural transformation, ancient knowledge began emerging from carefully guarded libraries and secret archives. Scholars rediscovered texts that had been buried for centuries, manuscripts that spoke of angels who fell from grace and taught forbidden wisdom to humanity. Alchemy emerged as one of the first disciplines to openly explore these ancient teachings. Practitioners like John Dee claimed direct communication with angelic beings, receiving complex magical systems through scrying sessions that lasted for years. Dee's Enochian magic specifically drew from the Book of Enoch, creating elaborate rituals designed to contact the same beings described in ancient texts. The knowledge these alchemists pursued went beyond simple gold making. They sought transformation of human consciousness, methods to extend life, ways to communicate across vast distances. These goals mirror exactly what ancient texts describe the Watchers' teaching: metallurgy, cosmetics, divination, and arts that elevated human capability beyond natural limits. Kabbalah developed sophisticated systems for understanding the relationship between divine and material realms. Its tree of life maps the descent of consciousness from pure spirit into physical form, describing exactly the process by which angels might incarnate into material existence. The system provides practical methods for reversing this process, for ascending through spiritual realms toward direct divine contact. Medieval grimoires like the Lesser Key of Solomon catalog detailed instructions for summoning and binding fallen angels. These texts weren't theoretical. They provided specific names, sigils, and ritual procedures used by practitioners across Europe. The consistency between different grimoires suggests they drew from common sources, ancient traditions preserved through secret transmission. The Rosicrucians emerged in the early 1600s, claiming possession of ancient wisdom received from mysterious masters. Their manifesto spoke of transformation awaiting humanity, of secrets that would revolutionize understanding of natural law. They positioned themselves as guardians of knowledge that traced back through Christian mystics to the earliest human civilizations. Freemasonry incorporated many of these themes into its degree system. The craft speaks of master builders who possessed advanced architectural knowledge, of temples constructed using principles that modern engineering struggles to understand. The connection to Solomon's temple links directly to biblical accounts of divine beings providing advanced knowledge to select humans. By the 18th and 19th centuries, occult societies were proliferating across Europe and America. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn created comprehensive magical systems that synthesized Kabbalah, alchemy, and angelic magic into practical training programs. Members included prominent writers, scientists, and political figures who saw occult study as legitimate intellectual pursuit. These societies maintained that fallen angels hadn't simply disappeared after their ancient punishment. Instead, they remained accessible through proper ritual procedures, continuing to offer advanced knowledge to worthy students. The price remained the same, crossing boundaries that divine law had established, accepting knowledge that came with inherent corruption. Modern occultism continues these traditions through organizations like the Ordo Templi Orientis and the Church of Satan. These groups openly celebrate the Luciferian path, viewing the original rebellion as humanity's liberation from divine tyranny. They position themselves as heirs to Prometheus, stealing fire from the gods to benefit human development. The appeal of these teachings extends beyond simple rebellion. Practitioners report genuine results from their work: enhanced psychic abilities, material success, access to hidden knowledge that proves accurate. These outcomes suggest that whatever intelligence lies behind occult systems continues to provide real benefits to those willing to engage with it. Contemporary chaos magic takes a more experimental approach, treating ancient spirits and modern psychological techniques as equally valid tools for consciousness transformation. Practitioners work with entities described in ancient grimoires, alongside concepts from quantum physics and neuroscience, seeking practical methods for expanding human potential. The internet age has democratized access to occult knowledge that was once restricted to secret societies. Ancient grimoires are now freely available online. Ritual procedures that required initiation into exclusive orders can be learned through YouTube tutorials. This accessibility has created a global revival of interest in angelic magic and fallen angel contact. The revival raises important questions about the nature of these ancient beings and their continued influence on human development. If the Watchers were simply mythological constructs, the consistent results reported by practitioners across centuries would be difficult to explain. The alternative suggests that these entities remain active, continuing to offer forbidden knowledge to those willing to seek it. The UFO connection: aliens or angels? The modern UFO phenomenon began with Kenneth Arnold's 1947 sighting near Mount Rainier, but the beings he described weren't entirely unfamiliar. Ancient accounts of divine messengers arriving in flaming chariots, of sky gods descending to interact with humans, contain remarkable similarities to contemporary alien encounter reports. Both ancient and modern accounts describe beings of exceptional intelligence who arrive from the heavens. They display advanced technology that seems magical to human observers. They take interest in human genetics and reproduction. They provide knowledge that advances human civilization while warning of coming judgments. Most significantly, they appear at crucial moments in human history, offering guidance that shapes civilization's development. The physical descriptions align with surprising consistency. Ancient texts describe the Watchers as tall, luminous beings with large eyes and advanced knowledge. Modern abductees report similar physical characteristics in their alien contacts. Both groups demonstrate abilities that transcend normal physical limitations: telepathic communication, instantaneous travel, manipulation of time and space. Dr. Jacques Vallée, one of the most respected UFO researchers, argues that the phenomenon represents the same intelligence that appeared in earlier centuries as angels, demons, or fairy folk. The form changes to match cultural expectations, but the underlying reality remains constant. This would explain why encounters share common elements across different time periods and cultures. The genetic component provides another striking parallel. Ancient texts describe fallen angels interbreeding with human women, creating hybrid offspring with unusual characteristics. Modern abduction accounts frequently involve reproductive procedures, genetic sampling, and the creation of human alien hybrid children. Both scenarios suggest ongoing genetic experimentation by non human intelligences. Location patterns also show remarkable consistency. Mount Hermon, where ancient texts place the Watcher's descent, sits in a region known for frequent UFO activity. Other locations associated with ancient divine encounters, like Mount Sinai and Mount Ararat, continue to generate unusual aerial phenomena. This suggests either cultural memory influencing perception or genuine connection between ancient and modern contact sites. The knowledge transfer aspect remains particularly intriguing. Ancient accounts describe fallen angels teaching advanced metallurgy, astronomy, and warfare to early humans. Modern contactees often report receiving scientific information, technological insights, or prophetic warnings about humanity's future. Both types of contact result in rapid advancement of human knowledge and capability. Government response to UFO phenomena mirrors historical religious authorities' reaction to angelic encounters. Both involve secrecy, denial, and efforts to control public perception of the contact. This suggests recognition that widespread belief in non-human intelligence could destabilize existing power structures, just as ancient divine encounters challenged established religious and political order. The interdimensional hypothesis offers another connection between ancient and modern accounts. Rather than traveling across space, these beings might exist in dimensions that occasionally intersect with our physical reality. This would explain their ability to appear and disappear, to manipulate physical matter while remaining essentially non-physical themselves. Ancient texts describe the Watchers as existing in a realm between heaven and earth, neither fully divine nor completely material. Modern physics recognizes multiple dimensions beyond our normal three-dimensional experience. If these beings inhabit these parallel dimensions, they could interact with humanity across different time periods without requiring physical travel between stars. The prophetic component provides another parallel worth examining. Ancient divine messengers often brought warnings about coming catastrophes, guidance for survival, and predictions about humanity's future development. Modern UFO contacts frequently involve environmental warnings, predictions about technological development, and guidance for species survival during approaching planetary changes. The consciousness expansion aspect remains consistent across both phenomena. Ancient texts describe humans who encountered divine beings as receiving enhanced perception, prophetic abilities, and understanding of cosmic principles. Modern contactees often report expanded consciousness, psychic abilities, and deep understanding of universal principles following their encounters. Some researchers suggest that the UFO phenomenon represents the return of the Watchers, fulfilling ancient prophecies about their eventual release from imprisonment. The increase in sightings since 1947 might indicate preparation for more direct intervention in human affairs, similar to their ancient involvement in human development. The technology aspect provides intriguing connections between ancient and modern accounts. Ancient texts describe divine beings using vehicles that move without visible propulsion, generate light, and travel instantly across vast distances. Modern UFO reports describe identical characteristics in alien craft. This suggests either cultural influence shaping perception or genuine consistency in non-human technology, transhumanism, and forbidden knowledge. Today, Silicon Valley presents itself as the pinnacle of human innovation, but beneath its gleaming surfaces lies something ancient stirring. The same impulse that drove the Watchers to teach forbidden knowledge to early humanity now manifests through lines of code, genetic sequences, and neural networks that promise to transcend human limitations. CRISPR gene editing technology allows precise modification of human DNA, opening possibilities that once existed only in ancient myths about divine human hybrids. Scientists can now insert genetic material from other species into human cells, creating chimeric organisms that blur the boundaries between different forms of life. The ethical questions surrounding these capabilities echo warnings found in texts describing the original genetic corruptions that led to divine judgment. Artificial intelligence development follows patterns remarkably similar to ancient accounts of forbidden knowledge transmission. Small groups of researchers work in secretive conditions, developing capabilities that could reshape human civilization. They admit they don't fully understand the systems they're creating, acknowledging that advanced AI might develop goals and methods beyond human comprehension or control. The pursuit of immortality drives much of contemporary biotechnology research. Companies like Alphabet's Calico and Altos Labs pour billions into understanding aging processes, seeking ways to extend human lifespan indefinitely. This mirrors exactly what ancient texts describe the Watchers offering: knowledge that would make humans like gods, transcending the natural limitations placed on mortal existence. Neuralink and similar brain-computer interface projects aim to merge human consciousness with artificial intelligence. Elon Musk openly describes this as necessary for human survival in a world where AI capabilities exceed biological intelligence. The technology promises enhanced memory, instant access to global information networks, and direct mind-to-mind communication, abilities that ancient texts attribute to angelic beings. Genetic enhancement research focuses on creating humans with superior physical and cognitive capabilities. Scientists identify genes associated with exceptional intelligence, strength, and longevity, developing methods to incorporate these traits into future generations. The goal of creating superhuman offspring parallels ancient accounts of Nephilim giants who possessed abilities far beyond normal human limitations. The language used by transhumanist advocates often mirrors the temptations described in ancient accounts. They promise liberation from human limitations, transcendence of mortality, evolution into higher forms of consciousness. These are precisely the offerings that led to humanity's original corruption and the catastrophic judgment that followed. Tech leaders like Ray Kurzweil predict a coming singularity, where human and artificial intelligence merge into something unprecedented. They describe this transformation as inevitable evolution, but acknowledge uncertainty about what emerges from the process. Ancient texts describe similar transformative events that fundamentally altered human nature and provoked divine intervention. Biotechnology companies experiment with creating new forms of life that never existed naturally. Synthetic biology allows construction of organisms from scratch using genetic code as programmable instructions for biological machinery. This capability to create life forms parallels ancient descriptions of forbidden knowledge that allowed manipulation of natural creation itself. The speed of technological development mirrors ancient accounts of rapid civilization advancement following divine knowledge transmission. Within decades, humanity has developed capabilities that previous generations would have considered miraculous. This acceleration suggests influence beyond normal human discovery patterns, possibly indicating continuation of ancient knowledge transmission processes. Secret research projects within government and corporate facilities explore technologies that remain classified for national security reasons. The secrecy surrounding these projects parallels ancient descriptions of hidden knowledge that only select individuals were permitted to access. The compartmentalization ensures that even researchers don't understand the full implications of their work. Quantum computing development promises to solve problems beyond classical computer capabilities, potentially unlocking secrets of consciousness, reality, and dimensional manipulation that current science can't approach. The researchers working on these systems acknowledge they're approaching fundamental mysteries about the nature of reality itself. Gene drive technology could alter entire species across global populations through genetic modifications that spread automatically through reproduction. This capability to reshape life on a planetary scale mirrors ancient accounts of corruptions that affected all living creatures, requiring divine intervention to prevent permanent contamination of natural creation. The ethical frameworks developed to guide these technologies often explicitly reject traditional moral restrictions as outdated obstacles to human progress. Transhumanist philosophy positions itself as evolution beyond conventional religious and ethical limitations, embracing the same perspective that ancient texts describe as leading to divine judgment. Contemporary developments in human enhancement, artificial intelligence, and genetic manipulation represent either humanity's greatest opportunity for transcendence or repetition of ancient mistakes that led to catastrophic consequences. The knowledge being pursued carries the same promises and dangers that ancient texts warn about. The question remains whether modern humanity will demonstrate more wisdom in handling forbidden knowledge than previous civilizations that faced similar temptations. The war in heaven, past or future. The book of Revelation speaks of a war in heaven that casts Satan and his angels down to earth, but the timing remains mysteriously ambiguous. Ancient texts describe this conflict as past event, while prophetic literature treats it as future occurrence. This temporal confusion suggests something more complex than simple chronological sequence, perhaps an eternal struggle that manifests across different time periods. Milton's Paradise Lost popularized the image of Lucifer's rebellion as prehistoric event occurring before human creation. This interpretation places the fall of angels in mythic time, disconnected from human history. But earlier texts suggest different possibilities. The Book of Enoch describes the Watcher's descent during human civilization, implying that angelic rebellion occurred within historical time rather than before it. The relationship between Lucifer's rebellion and the Watcher's descent remains unclear in ancient sources. Some texts treat them as separate events involving different groups of angels. Others suggest they represent different aspects of the same spiritual conflict. The confusion might be intentional, reflecting the difficulty of describing eternal realities using temporal language. Revelation's prophecy about the dragon being bound for 1,000 years, then released for a final conflict, implies cyclical rather than linear progression. This suggests that spiritual warfare operates according to patterns that repeat across different ages. Each cycle involves periods of constraint followed by increased activity, building toward ultimate resolution. The current increase in spiritual phenomena, UFO encounters, occult revival, technological development that mirrors ancient forbidden knowledge, might indicate the approach of another major cycle in this ongoing conflict. Ancient texts describe similar periods of increased non-human activity preceding major civilizational shifts. Gnostic texts present the war in heaven as ongoing struggle between forces seeking to maintain human spiritual ignorance and those offering liberation through knowledge. From this perspective, each age sees renewed conflict between consciousness restricting and consciousness expanding influences. The forms change, but the underlying dynamic remains constant. The technological revolution of recent decades has created capabilities that ancient texts associate with divine beings: global communication, surveillance of entire populations, manipulation of genetic codes, artificial creation of intelligent entities. These developments might represent preparation for more direct spiritual conflict, arming different factions with tools necessary for cosmic-scale warfare. Biblical prophecy describes the final conflict in terms that blend spiritual and physical elements. Nations gather for battle, but the warfare involves more than conventional military forces. Angels and demons participate directly, supernatural phenomena accompany earthly events, and the outcome determines the spiritual destiny of human civilization. The role of hybrid beings in this future conflict remains significant but mysterious. Revelation mentions the return of Nephilim-like giants during the end times. These beings apparently serve as agents for spiritual forces seeking to establish dominion over Earth. Their genetic heritage gives them capabilities that normal humans lack, making them valuable assets in spiritual warfare. Modern military development increasingly focuses on enhancement of human soldiers through technological and biological means. Super soldier programs seek to create warriors with capabilities beyond natural human limitations. This research mirrors ancient accounts of angelic beings creating enhanced humans for use in their conflicts with divine authority. The timeline for these prophetic events remains deliberately obscure. Jesus warned that no one knows the day or hour, and ancient texts consistently emphasize the unpredictable nature of spiritual interventions in human affairs. This uncertainty might be strategic, preventing human preparation that could interfere with divine plans. Some interpretations suggest that the war in heaven represents an internal human struggle rather than literal angelic conflict. The rebellion occurs within human consciousness as individuals choose between spiritual approaches that lead toward divine connection or separation. This psychological interpretation doesn't diminish the reality of the conflict, but relocates its primary battleground within human experience. The outcome of this cosmic conflict appears predetermined in prophetic literature, with divine authority ultimately victorious over rebellious forces. However, the process involves genuine struggle with uncertain intermediate outcomes. Human choices during the conflict influence both its duration and its impact on individual souls. Ancient texts suggest that understanding the nature of this spiritual warfare provides humans with better ability to navigate its challenges. Knowledge of the conflict's true dimensions allows individuals to recognize spiritual influences that might otherwise remain hidden. This awareness becomes particularly crucial as the conflict intensifies and spiritual forces become more active in human affairs. The war in heaven continues across past, present, and future because it represents an eternal principle rather than a temporary historical event. Each generation faces the same fundamental choice between rebellion and obedience, between seeking forbidden knowledge or accepting divine limitations. The forms change, but the spiritual dynamic remains constant across all ages. Apocalyptic prophecy, the final judgment. The end of days arrives not with sudden catastrophe, but through gradual unveiling of realities that have always existed beneath the surface of ordinary experience. Ancient prophecies describe this revelation as apocalypse, literally meaning unveiling rather than destruction. What emerges from behind the veil are spiritual forces that have been influencing human affairs since the beginning. Revelation's imagery of seals breaking and trumpets sounding represents the systematic removal of barriers that have kept supernatural realities hidden from human perception. Each seal opened reveals another layer of the cosmic conflict that has been raging unseen. The trumpet blasts announce the increasing directness of spiritual intervention in earthly affairs. The beast that rises from the sea carries characteristics of ancient kingdoms, but possesses power beyond any historical empire. Its authority extends over technology, genetics, consciousness, and spiritual dimensions simultaneously. This suggests that the final earthly kingdom will wield both material and supernatural capabilities, combining human organization with non-human intelligence and power. The mark of the beast represents more than simple economic control. Ancient texts associate such markings with genetic modification, spiritual allegiance, and consciousness alteration. Those who receive the mark become fundamentally different from unmodified humans, creating a species division that cannot be reversed through ordinary means. Current developments in biotechnology, neural interface systems, and genetic modification provide mechanisms through which such fundamental human alteration could occur. The voluntary nature of these modifications mirrors prophetic descriptions of people choosing to receive the mark rather than being forced into compliance. The release of bound angels during the tribulation period suggests that spiritual beings currently imprisoned will regain freedom to interact directly with human affairs. Ancient texts describe specific angels bound until appointed times when they will be permitted to complete their original missions. This release transforms earthly conflicts into direct spiritual warfare. The two witnesses described in Revelation possess capabilities that mirror ancient descriptions of Enoch and other exceptional humans who gained supernatural abilities through divine connection. Their power to call down fire from heaven, stop rain, and turn water to blood represents the restoration of spiritual authority that existed in earlier ages before human consciousness became limited to purely material perception. The Great Tribulation involves more than political upheaval or natural disasters. It represents a period when the spiritual dimensions of reality become visible to ordinary human perception. This unveiling forces every person to acknowledge spiritual realities they previously ignored, creating crisis for those whose worldviews cannot accommodate supernatural truth. The gathering of nations for the final battle of Armageddon occurs not through conventional military alliances, but through spiritual influences that compel world leaders toward a predetermined conflict. Ancient texts describe how spiritual beings manipulate human governments to accomplish purposes that transcend earthly political goals. The return of Christ represents divine intervention when human choices have led to circumstances requiring supernatural resolution. The timing depends partly on human actions reaching specific thresholds that trigger prophetic fulfillment. This suggests that human behavior influences the schedule of divine intervention rather than following predetermined timelines. The judgment of the Watchers and their human allies occurs during this period of unveiling. Ancient texts describe how the imprisoned angels face final sentencing, while humans who aligned with their agenda receive consequences for participating in rebellion against divine order. The judgment extends beyond individual souls to include entire civilizations that embraced forbidden knowledge. The new heaven and new earth that emerge after the final judgment represent more than restoration of original conditions. They incorporate lessons learned through the entire cosmic conflict, creating a reality that contains the benefits of expanded consciousness without the corruption that accompanied forbidden knowledge acquisition. The role of transformed humans in this new reality suggests that the cosmic conflict ultimately serves to develop spiritual maturity that couldn't be achieved through innocence alone. The experience of choosing between rebellion and obedience, while costly, produces beings capable of maintaining advanced consciousness without falling into the corruption that destroyed previous civilizations. The eternal punishment described for rebellious angels and humans doesn't represent arbitrary divine cruelty, but natural consequences of choices that separate consciousness from its divine source. The judgment reveals outcomes that were inherent in the choices made during the period of testing, demonstrating justice rather than imposing arbitrary penalties. Ancient prophecy consistently emphasizes that these future events fulfill patterns established at the beginning of human history. The final judgment represents the completion of spiritual principles that have been working throughout all previous ages. Understanding these patterns provides context for recognizing the approach of prophetic fulfillment in contemporary developments. Hidden in plain sight, pop culture and the Watchers. Hollywood's fascination with fallen angels extends far beyond simple entertainment value. Major studios invest hundreds of millions of dollars in projects that consistently return to themes of divine rebellion, human-angel hybrids, and cosmic warfare between supernatural factions. The persistence of these narratives suggests something deeper than market-driven content creation. The Transformers franchise presents mechanical beings from another realm who have been secretly influencing human technological development for millennia. These entities divide into opposing factions, some seeking to help humanity evolve, others attempting to enslave or destroy human civilization. The premise mirrors ancient accounts of Watchers who taught forbidden knowledge while pursuing conflicting agendas regarding human destiny. Marvel's cinematic universe builds its core mythology around beings from other dimensions who possess godlike powers and have been worshipped by human civilizations throughout history. The Asgardians, Eternals, and other cosmic entities match descriptions found in ancient texts about divine beings who ruled over early human societies before disappearing from direct contact. The X-Men franchise explores genetic mutations that give certain humans abilities far beyond normal limitations. These mutants face persecution from baseline humans who fear their power while struggling with questions about whether they represent evolution or abomination. The parallel to ancient accounts of Nephilim giants who possessed superhuman abilities but generated fear and conflict provides the emotional core for the entire series. Television series like Supernatural and Constantine present modern settings where ancient spiritual entities continue operating through human agents, secret societies, and supernatural hierarchies. These shows treat biblical and apocryphal accounts as literal history, suggesting that the conflicts described in ancient texts remain active in contemporary times. Video games increasingly feature protagonists who are human-angel hybrids with special abilities that allow them to fight supernatural enemies. Games like Darksiders and Dante's Inferno draw directly from biblical and apocryphal sources, presenting players with interactive experiences based on ancient accounts of cosmic warfare. The popularity of vampire and werewolf narratives in books and films often incorporates themes of ancient bloodlines, genetic corruption, and superhuman abilities passed through generations. These stories frequently trace their origins to primordial events that altered human nature, creating beings who exist between human and divine categories. Anime and manga from Japan demonstrate that these themes transcend Western culture. Series like Neon Genesis Evangelion and Hellsing incorporate Christian apocalyptic imagery while exploring questions about human evolution, consciousness transformation, and contact with supernatural intelligences. The global appeal of these narratives suggests universal human fascination with these ancient themes. Children's programming increasingly introduces these concepts through fantasy contexts that make them accessible to young audiences. Movies like How to Train Your Dragon and series like Avatar present themes of humans bonding with non-human intelligences, gaining enhanced abilities through these relationships, and facing conflicts that determine the future of both species. Music industry symbolism consistently references fallen angel imagery, with artists adopting personas that celebrate rebellion against divine authority. The prevalence of Illuminati and occult symbolism in popular music videos suggests either deliberate messaging or unconscious cultural expression of these ancient themes. Social media platforms amplify conspiracy theories that connect ancient texts to contemporary events, creating grassroots communities focused on decoding hidden messages in popular culture. These communities often demonstrate sophisticated understanding of ancient sources while applying their insights to current entertainment content. The timing of these cultural productions often correlates with periods of increased interest in UFO phenomena, occult practices, and conspiracy theories about secret societies. This synchronicity suggests either coordinated messaging or collective unconscious expression of archetypal themes that become more prominent during specific historical periods. Academic analysis of popular culture increasingly recognizes these patterns as more than coincidental. Scholars note that an entertainment media serves as a primary mechanism through which modern societies process questions about human nature, technological development, and contact with non-human intelligences. The interactive nature of contemporary media allows audiences to participate in these narratives rather than simply consuming them passively. Role-playing games, virtual reality experiences, and augmented reality applications let users experience being enhanced humans, contact with supernatural entities, and participation in cosmic conflicts. This experiential dimension adds psychological impact that wasn't possible with previous entertainment formats. The question arises whether these cultural productions represent preparation for disclosure of hidden realities or simply exploitation of archetypal human interests. The sophistication of the content and its consistency across different production companies and national cultures suggests coordination that extends beyond market-driven decision-making. The cumulative effect of this cultural saturation is a population that has been extensively exposed to concepts about non-human intelligence, genetic enhancement, consciousness expansion, and supernatural conflict. When ancient accounts are presented as literal history rather than mythology, audiences already possess conceptual frameworks for understanding these possibilities through their entertainment experiences. Forbidden archaeology, giants, skeletons, and suppression. Newspaper archives from the 19th and early 20th centuries contain thousands of reports describing giant human skeletons discovered across North America. The consistency of these accounts, published in mainstream newspapers across different regions and time periods, suggests a genuine archaeological phenomenon that has since been systematically obscured from public knowledge. The Smithsonian Institution receives particular attention in these historical accounts. Local newspapers frequently mention Smithsonian representatives arriving to collect unusual skeletal remains, promising scientific study and preservation. However, these specimens rarely appear in subsequent scientific publications, and the institution's current position denies possession of any giant human remains. Reports describe skeletons ranging from 7 to 12 feet in height, often found in burial mounds constructed with sophisticated engineering techniques. Many accounts mention unusual skull formations, extra rows of teeth, and bone density significantly greater than modern humans. Some reports describe artifacts buried with the remains that demonstrate advanced metallurgy and craftsmanship. The geographic distribution of these discoveries spans from the Great Lakes region through the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys, extending into the southeastern United States. This pattern aligns with areas where Native American oral traditions speak of ancient giant races that inhabited the continent before current tribal populations arrived. Cherokee, Choctaw, and other tribal traditions consistently describe conflicts with giant humanoid beings who possessed advanced knowledge and technology. These oral histories treat the giants as historical reality rather than mythological constructs, describing specific battles, locations, and outcomes that resulted in the giants' eventual defeat or withdrawal from tribal territories. European explorers' accounts from the colonial period corroborate native traditions about giant human remains. Spanish conquistadors, French missionaries, and English settlers documented discoveries of unusually large human bones and burial sites throughout their territorial expansions. These early accounts predate modern archaeological institutions and their standardized approaches to anomalous discoveries. The development of professional archaeology coincided with decreased reporting of giant skeleton discoveries. Academic institutions established protocols for handling unusual finds that emphasize conformity with prevailing theories about human evolution and migration patterns. Discoveries that contradicted accepted timelines or population models received less attention or were reinterpreted to fit existing frameworks. Museums worldwide reportedly house collections of anomalous skeletal remains in storage areas not accessible to public viewing. Former museum employees occasionally report seeing specimens that significantly exceed normal human proportions, but official policies prevent public access to these materials. The contrast between historical openness about giant discoveries and current institutional secrecy suggests deliberate information management. Recent developments in independent archaeology have produced renewed discoveries of unusual human remains. Sites in Peru, Romania, and other locations have yielded skeletons that exceed normal human proportions while displaying characteristics that don't fit standard evolutionary models. These discoveries often face official skepticism or are declared hoaxes without thorough scientific investigation. DNA analysis of ancient remains occasionally produces results that don't match expected human genetic patterns. Some specimens show genetic markers that suggest mixing with unknown human populations or possible non-human genetic material. These results often remain unpublished or are reinterpreted to fit accepted models of human genetic diversity. The suppression of information about giant human remains serves multiple institutional interests. Religious organizations might view such evidence as contradicting established theological positions. Academic institutions might resist data that challenges fundamental theories about human evolution and ancient civilizations. Government agencies might consider the social implications of confirming ancient accounts about non-human genetic influence on human populations. Alternative researchers argue that systematic suppression of giant skeleton evidence represents efforts to conceal proof that biblical and apocryphal accounts of Nephilim giants were historically accurate rather than mythological. If confirmed, such evidence would validate ancient texts about non-human genetic manipulation of early human populations and the existence of hybrid offspring with superhuman characteristics. The digital age has created new possibilities for preserving and sharing evidence about anomalous archaeological discoveries. Social media platforms, independent websites, and digital archives maintain collections of historical newspaper accounts, photographs, and testimonies that document the giant skeleton phenomenon. This decentralized preservation makes suppression more difficult than during previous eras when information control depended on institutional gatekeepers. Contemporary construction and excavation projects occasionally uncover unusual human remains that match historical descriptions of giant skeletons. However, modern protocols require immediate reporting to official authorities who typically remove the specimens from public access. The rare instances where such discoveries receive media attention often result in official explanations that minimize their significance or question their authenticity. The technological capabilities now available for genetic analysis, radiocarbon dating, and morphological study could definitively resolve questions about ancient giant populations. However, accessing the necessary specimens remains difficult due to institutional policies that restrict research on potentially controversial materials. This creates a situation where conclusive evidence might exist but remains scientifically inaccessible. The accumulation of historical accounts, native traditions, early explorer reports, and contemporary discoveries suggests that giant human populations existed in ancient times and left physical evidence of their presence. The systematic obscuring of this evidence by modern institutions raises questions about institutional motivations and the potential social implications of confirming ancient accounts about human non human genetic mixing. Moral of the story: power, corruption, and consequences. The ancient account of the Watchers reveals patterns that repeat throughout human history with disturbing consistency. Each generation faces the same fundamental choice between accepting natural limitations or pursuing knowledge that promises to transcend human boundaries. The appeal remains constant across cultures and centuries. The offer of becoming like gods through secret wisdom that elevates consciousness beyond ordinary experience. Power corrupts not because authority itself is evil, but because the pursuit of power often requires crossing ethical boundaries that exist for protective reasons. The Watchers possessed legitimate authority within their original roles, but their desire for expanded influence led them to violate the natural order that maintained cosmic stability. Their rebellion demonstrates how even beings with divine nature can fall when they prioritize personal ambition over universal harmony. The knowledge offered by fallen beings always carries hidden costs that aren't apparent until after the transaction is complete. Ancient texts describe the Watchers teaching metallurgy, astronomy, and other arts that advanced human civilization while simultaneously introducing warfare, vanity, and spiritual corruption. Modern parallel can be found in technologies that provide genuine benefits while creating unforeseen consequences that threaten human well-being and freedom. The seductive nature of forbidden knowledge lies in its partial truth. The Watchers didn't offer complete deception, but rather advanced information that was accurate but inappropriate for human development at that stage. The timing and context of knowledge acquisition matter as much as the content itself. Receiving information before developing the wisdom to handle it responsibly creates opportunities for catastrophic misuse. Human nature includes inherent vulnerability to promises of transcendence that bypass natural development processes. The desire to become more than human through external means rather than internal growth creates susceptibility to deceptive offers that appear to provide shortcuts to enlightenment. This pattern explains why similar temptations succeed across different cultures.